welcome back to Nocturne Library. Or welcome in if you're new here. I'm Ava Calloway, and thank you for letting this little corner of the internet be part of your nightly wind down. I know a lot of you come here at the end of the day to fall asleep, and I'm really glad you're here tonight. Tonight's sleep story, written by Nora Fielding, takes us to a cozy Paris morning market, tucked beneath a glass roof on a gray, drizzly day. If your mind's been busy today, you're in the right place. You'll step into a covered flower market where buckets of roses and eucalyptus wait in cool water. Café cups clink somewhere nearby, and a stall keeper quietly puts you to work sorting stems, trimming leaves, wrapping small posies in crisp paper, and setting the scissors and twine back in their proper places. There's the soft murmur of shoppers passing, the damp scent of petals and stone, the rustle of paper around fresh-cut blooms, and a faint ribbon of steam rising from a nearby espresso. And if you'd like to support the channel, a like or subscribe always helps. Now, take one easy breath in and let it go. Settle in, and I'll begin. Chapter 1. Arriving under the covered flower market after the festival. Rain has dried to a fine dampness on the canvas above you, and the light under the awnings is thin and gray. A bucket nudges your shin as you shift your weight on the wet stone. And somewhere beyond the stall, a cart rolls slowly across the market, its wheels making that rounded wooden sound over the slick pavement. In a little while, you will sort tulips by touch. Feel for the bend just below each bloom. Recut roses with the red-handled shears. Fill clear water picks one by one. And later, hide bind wire beneath raffia and brown craft paper until the bouquets look as if they came together by themselves, and wipe the shears dry before returning them to their shallow drawer. Whether you'll settle into the work or stay distracted, you can't yet tell. For now, though, you are already here, beneath the green painted ironwork, on the island in the middle of the river, under a roof that turns the morning into something sheltered and close. Yesterday's festival has thinned into signs rather than noise. A few extra stems remain in overfull buckets. A paper sleeve lies collapsed near a crate. Petals cling darkly to the stone where feet carried them, and rain pressed them flat. The air smells of leaves, damp twine, cut stems, and, from somewhere across the aisle where you cannot quite see in, coffee warming with milk. Cups touch saucers once, twice, in little porcelain notes that disappear into the canvas muted morning. You are tired in a way that has lost all sharpness. It is not the kind of tiredness that argues. It has settled into your shoulders, into the backs of your knees, into the heaviness of your hands before they begin any useful thing. You notice it without minding it much. In this light, with the awning edge dripping at intervals into the gutter beyond, tiredness feels less like a problem to solve than like another condition of the weather. The stall keeper looks up when you step fully into the stall's narrow shelter. There is no flourish to the greeting. just a glance that rests on you a fraction longer than courtesy requires, taking in your face, your hands, the damp at your hem, as if measuring what sort of mourning you have brought with you and whether it will fit here. Their own apron is already tied. One hand rests on the rim of a white enamel bucket. Their face has the composed look of someone who has been up for some time already, though not by much. Then they incline their head toward the open space beside the buckets, making room for you in the stall. You go there at once. That is enough. No one explains the first custom because no one needs to. The market begins this way, especially after a day of abundance. Buckets straightened, aprons shaken free of yesterday's creases. One slow look over every stem before selling begins. Not judging exactly, more like taking attendance, seeing what remains, seeing what still has the strength for height, what belongs lower and nearer the hand, what can travel if given a water pick and a sleeve, what should be recut and stood deeper in fresh water. It is practical and almost wordless, and because of that, it leaves plenty of room for your own silence. The stall keeper lifts a second apron from a hook and gives it one brisk shake. The cloth opens with a soft snap, then settles into its own weight again. For a moment, they hold it by the tapes, not offering it yet, only letting it hang between you, as if to make plain what it is. Not a favor, not exactly, but a place prepared. Then they hand it to you without comment. The linen is cool where it touches your fingers, cooler at the folds where the air has not reached. You gather the tapes, feeling the slight stiffness where they have been pressed flat, and thread one through the small metal ring. The ring gives a faint click against itself. You draw the cloth around your waist and pull it snug. The familiar act steadies you. Work clothes change the scale of a morning. What had seemed large and vague from outside the awning narrows to what is in reach. A row of buckets, a folded stack of craft sleeves, a shallow drawer set into the work table, the clean smell of stems when you step into the open space beside the buckets. You do it more carefully than the distance requires. The stone there is damp, but clear. The nearest enamel rim catches the gray light. Water darkens the stems where they enter it. Nothing in the stall announces the moment. And yet, it alters the morning at once. You are no longer standing at its edge, looking in, the bucket at your knee, the table at your hip, the sleeves, the shears, the quiet of the place. All of it has shifted a little nearer. The first bucket is slightly out of line with the others, turned askew after yesterday's traffic. You place both hands on its rim. The enamel is cold and faintly gritty with dried spray. Water shifts inside with a low slosh, stems tapping the side. You move it only an inch, maybe less, enough to bring its edge even with the next one. The stall keeper does the same with another bucket farther down. A handle clicks softly against metal, and then stills. Across the market, a chair leg scrapes once. Then the cart sound passes again, farther off this time, diminishing along the wet stone. The rain has nearly stopped, but the awnings still let go of it in slow drops. One falls from the edge near the entrance and strikes the gutter with a tiny, bright note. You continue down the row, not hurrying. A bucket of market roses. One of tulips with their leaves folded cool against the stems. Ranunculus in layered cups of color, some still tight from the night. Lisianthus with their papery, patient blossoms. The stall-keeper's hands move in your near vision, representing a bucket so the handle lies flat, lifting a stem that is slumped against its neighbors, plucking away a petal gone brown at the edge. Nothing dramatic changes, and yet the stall begins, little by little, to look more like itself. You find that this sort of order is easiest when you are tired. There is no extra energy to waste on overthinking. A bucket sits straight, or it does not. A sleeve is folded, or it is shaken open and stacked. A stem belongs in this water or that one. At the center of the work table, the red-handled shears rest on a folded linen square, exactly where they have been put down. Their blades catch what little light filters in from the Seine side, not brightly, only enough to show the clean line of steel. Near them lies a pair of thorn strippers made of dull green plastic, their shape more practical than elegant. A spool of bind wire sits on its side, the loose end tucked under itself. Raffia is coiled in a shallow basket. Brown craft paper leans in a neat sheaf against the crate below. The tools tell you what the morning will require. Later, your hands will know each one in turn. For now, they remain where they belong, included in the stall's first inventory of itself. The stall-keeper reaches for a bucket of tulips and draws it forward by the handle. Not to begin sorting yet, only to place it where the light is a little truer. They glance at you, then at the flowers, then back along the line. It is a way of saying, yes, these first, not now, soon. You nod, though there is no need. The smell of coffee comes over again, richer this time, joined by the warm sweetness of milk. Somewhere hidden by the opposite awning, someone sets down a cup. Porcelain touches wood. A spoon circles once, making a faint ring against the side, then stops. The market has not filled yet. It is still in that early hour when every sound can be placed. Footsteps pass at a measured pace under the arches. Water trickles briefly through the gutter. Paper shifts as the stall-keeper lifts a stack of sleeves and taps their bottom edges square against the table. You take the stack when it is offered. The craft is dry on the outside, faintly cool within. You shake the sleeves loose, one by one, not fully opening them, only letting them breathe after being pressed together. Each gives a crisp rustle that blends with the other stall sounds so neatly, it feels less like noise than texture. You stack them again with their mouths aligned, ready for later, when the thirstier stems will be fitted with little clear tubes of water and tucked inside for travel. The stall-keeper watches your hands for one moment, sees that the sleeves are squared properly, and turns back to the buckets. brief lack of correction feels more companionable than praise. The work simply goes on. At the far end of the stall, a cluster of leftover festival ribbons has been gathered into a loose knot around the leg of a crate. Their colors are dulled by the gray morning, but not unpleasantly. You stoop to free one strip that has trailed into a damp patch on the stone, and the movement reminds you of the weight still living in your back and thighs. Not pain, exactly. Just your back and thighs remind you. When you stand again, the apron settles against your knees, and the bucket water gives another low shift beside you. The stallkeeper shakes out their own apron once, palms flattening the cloth against the front. Then they stand still. You do the same. This is the pause before the finer work begins. Not a ceremonial thing, not precious, only a short stop after the broad straightening and before the more intimate work of stems and blades and water. You stand side by side, not touching, your attention moving over what is here. Tulips that will need checking by the neck below the bloom. Roses that should have their thorns stripped before their stems are recut on a long slant so they can drink properly. Lisianthus that have held well through the night. Ranunculus that may open another degree if given fresh water and a little mist. Sleeves to be readied. Water picks to be filled. Raffia to be drawn through the fingers and tied over hidden wire. Shears to be lifted from the linen square, wiped dry after use, and returned to the shallow drawer when their turn is done. You know the order before you start. A customer-shaped shadow crosses the aisle and keeps going. No one calls out. Selling has not started yet. The stall remains in its own early rhythm, and the person beyond the awning seems to understand that, or perhaps simply has another errand. Their footsteps fade into the larger hush of the market. You notice then how the light has changed by so little it would be easy to miss. The gray from the riverside is not brighter exactly, but more spread out. It reaches farther under the awning, touching the rims of the buckets and the wet stone between them. The green paint of the ironwork overhead shows itself more clearly where the damp has darkened it near the joints. If you looked up long enough, you could follow the beams in repeating lines, practical and decorative at once, carrying the roof above the flowers as they have done through so many mornings. The stallkeeper bends and nudges one final bucket into line with the toe of a boot. The enamel taps lightly against its neighbor. That small sound lands with surprising satisfaction. A row is a row again. Water settles. Leaves stop brushing one another. Without looking at you, the stallkeeper reaches to the table and shifts the folded linen square a little nearer the edge, bringing the shears within easier reach for later. Then they place the thorn strippers beside it, parallel, and close the shallow drawer with an absent-minded touch to be sure it is fully shut. The gesture is so habitual, it has no display in it. Tools rest where they rest. Hands will find them when needed. You breathe in the market as it is now. Damp canvas above, coffee and milk across the aisle, the green smell of cut stems, the mineral scent rising from wet stone, A drop falls from the awning edge into the gutter. Somewhere farther down the covered row, paper crackles, then stills. Beside you, the tulips stand in their bucket, upright for the moment, leaves beaded faintly from yesterday's spray, waiting only in the plain way flowers do when they are set in water and left under shelter. The stall-keeper places a hand on the tulip bucket and turns it slightly toward you. The stems make a soft, brushing sound against one another. The bucket comes to rest with its open face angled your way. The pale necks and closed cups gathered there in the truer light. Then they step aside, not far, only enough to clear the space and leave it to you. The gesture is small, but it admits you into the work. Chapter 2. Straightening buckets and shaking out aprons before selling begins. Your hands come to the tulips first, not to sort them yet, only to steady the bucket, while the stall-keeper straightens the one beside it. The enamel gives a small tap against the stone as it turns. Water moves inside with a low, shifting sound. Not a splash so much as a weight finding level again. One bucket, then the next. Handles are turned inward or laid flat in matching directions, so they do not jut into the narrow space where knees and aprons pass. The work begins this way because it is broad and visible. After the crowded generosity of yesterday, lines begin to appear again, and with them, a use for your hands. You set your palm against the rim of a white pail and feel the chill of it through the damp air. A few leaves cling to the outside where someone's wet hand had brushed past earlier. You smooth them away with the side of your thumb and nudge the bucket a finger's width to the left until it stands in better relation to the others. It is the kind of adjustment that would hardly show to anyone passing the aisle. But from inside the stall, it changes the row. Space opens. The floor appears between things. Beyond the awning edge, gray light comes in from the riverside. Somewhere farther down the market, a cart rolls over the pavement with that hollow wooden rattle softened by rain. Closer by, under the canvas and ironwork, footsteps pass in ones and twos. Across the aisle, coffee and warm milk drift over in intervals. And once a cup touches its saucer with a bright clink that settles almost at once back into the morning, the stall-keeper lifts an apron from a peg, gives it one practiced shake, and ties it on without looking down. The fabric snaps lightly in the air before falling straight. Then they take another apron from the hook below, a spare one, less creased than the rest. They fold the top edge once over their hand, cross the stall, and leave it on the nearest hook to you. No words, only the placement. Near enough that you do not have to reach. Obvious enough that there is no mistaking it. It waits there. You put on the apron because it is there for you. Because your hands are already damp and beginning to smell of stems. Because this is how you stop standing nearby and begin to be of use. The cloth is cool at first where it touches your front, then warmer once the ties are fastened behind your back. You smooth the apron down once over your middle without thinking. It falls to your knees, plain and useful, with a faint crease where it had hung folded. By the time you lift your head again, the stallkeeper has moved 2 more buckets into line. There is no hurry in them, and because there is no hurry in them, none rises in you either. The pace is slow enough that your tiredness can keep up. You do not need to decide what to do next. The next thing is visible. A bucket sits slightly askew. A handle points outward. A pail of greenery has drifted too close to the roses. You correct one thing, then another. Some pails are white enamel with dark rims nicked here and there. Others are plain florist's buckets, lighter and duller, with water lines ghosted on their sides. Each makes its own sound on the stone. Enamel, a clearer tap. Plastic, a muted scrape. Metal, a brief ring. As you move them, you begin to hear the stall as much as see it. Tap, slide, water shifting around stems. The dry brush of leaves against your sleeve. Yesterday's abundance still shows itself in traces. A torn craft sleeve lies folded in on itself near the wrapping shelf. A strand of raffia has fallen and gone dark where it touched the floor. 2 bunches of greenery have been set down in the wrong order. Broad leaves interrupting finer ones. Nothing ruined, nothing dramatic. Just the fullness that follows a busy day, when things have been used quickly and put back later than intended. This morning is for putting things back in order. The stallkeeper takes the greenery first, separating one kind from another with a few economical motions. You find yourself doing the same with the buckets, making parallel rows where there had been only clusters. The taller stems go farther back, shorter ones nearer the aisle. Empty pails are nested together and turned so their handles rest flat. One bucket with cloudy water is carried aside, not yet emptied, only removed from the front line, so it will be changed when the closer work begins. Your arms learn the weight of each vessel before your mind does. Some lift easily. Some ask for both hands and a firmer stance. When you bend, the apron shifts against your knees. The wet air brushes the back of your neck where your collar has loosened. You feel the work in small places. Fingers cool from the rims. Forearms taut for a moment when a bucket is fuller than it looks. The soles of your shoes finding the rougher joints between stones. It is useful to have something exact to answer with your body. Turn this, lift that. Set it down without knocking the next. At the edge of the stallkeeper pauses and gives the front row one long glance. This, too, belongs to the custom. Not selling yet, not even sorting in earnest. First, the buckets are made straight, the aprons tied, the broad shape of the place restored. Then comes the look over every stem, that unspoken inventory taken with the eyes before the hands begin finer judgments. You join that pause for a moment, standing beside the tulips and roses, looking where they look. The flowers are different now from how they were in the first dimness. Order changes them before water or trimming does. Once the buckets stand square, The stems seem to rise more distinctly from them. Tulips keep their own inward curves. The market roses, a little ruffled from yesterday, still carry themselves well in deeper pails. Lisianthus farther back make a pale, folded cloud of buds and open cups. You do not go to them yet. It is enough to notice where each kind has ended up, and where each will likely go next when the morning narrows into touch and tools. The stall keeper picks up a small hand broom from beneath the wrapping shelf and sweeps together a scatter of leaves, petal bits, and softened paper scraps. The broom makes a dry, brushing sound over the stone, even in the damp. They gather the little heap onto a square of yesterday's newsprint and carry it away. In the cleared patch, the floor darkens evenly again. You had not realized how much the scraps interrupted the lines until they are gone. You turn another bucket so the label faces inward instead of out. Then another. It pleases you more than it should, perhaps, this reduction of visual noise. The fronts of the pails line up cleanly. The stall begins to look like a place where things are done in an order you can trust. A drip gathers at the awning edge and falls into the gutter beyond the stall. Then another, spaced far apart. The rain is no longer really rain, more what remains of it on canvas and iron. You look up only briefly. The roofed market has its own morning under there, separate from the open quay and the river beyond. Sheltered, but not sealed. Air moves through, carrying stone coolness, coffee, damp paper, leaves. The stall keeper returns and lifts the corner of the spare apron's hook, as if checking what hangs there, then lets their hand fall when they see yours tied securely in place. It is such a small gesture that it almost disappears. Yet, in it, there is the whole shape of their trust. Not praise, not instruction. Only the assumption that you are in the work now and can remain there. You take up the pails one by one and help build the stack straighter. The rims fit with a hollow, satisfying knock. Water beads on the outside of one and runs over your knuckles before dropping to the floor. Nearby, stems knock lightly together when a bucket settles into place. You think, not for the first time, that flower work is full of sounds too modest to notice unless everything else has gone quiet around them. Across the aisle, someone says a few words, too low to make out. A chair leg scrapes once. Then the cups again, and the smell of milk warming. Under the awning, none of it intrudes. It enters the morning the way the river light does, by degrees. The stall keeper reaches for a folded cloth, wipes a ring of water from the shelf where a bucket had stood overnight, and sets the cloth back in the same place. Even these broad first tasks have their own exactness, not fussy, just repeated enough times to settle into the hands. You begin to recognize the arrangement that works best. Front buckets aligned with their rims nearly even. Taller stock behind. Wrapping space clear, except for what belongs there. Aprons on. Floor passable. Empty pails nested. Nothing protruding into the narrow lane where a customer might later step in from the aisle. It is practical, yes, but also something your eyes can rest in. After the festival's spill of stems and paper and quick exchanges, this arrangement gives back a kind of plainness. The stallkeeper passes behind you, close enough that the hem of their apron brushes your sleeve. They set one bucket down beside your foot, then shift it half a turn with the toe of their shoe until the handle lies flush against the side. You copy the motion with the next one, then hesitate a beat, looking to see whether you have turned it too far, whether the gap you have left belongs with the others. The stallkeeper only sets the next bucket into the line without correction. Soon the row answers itself, each handle turned, each bucket facing the same way, each gap between them nearly equal. The repetition takes your thoughts and lowers them into the hands. You stop counting what you have done. You simply continue until there is less to correct. At last, there comes a point when moving one more pail would not improve anything. The front line is made. The side buckets stand clear. The nested empties are in back. The floor has its dark sheen again, with only a few leaf shadows near the drain. You and the stallkeeper stand for a moment in the narrow middle of the stall, not looking at each other, only over the rows you have straightened. The flowers haven't changed. The stall has. Nothing has been transformed. Tulips still lean where tulips lean. Roses still carry the weather in their outer petals. But the stall has found its edges again. It has the look of itself. The stallkeeper reaches out and smooths the front of one apron tie where it has twisted, then gives the nearest bucket the smallest final nudge. Enamel touches stone with a single neat tap. After that, they rest their hand on the rim of the tulips once more, and your attention follows there naturally. Only now, with the rows made true and the broad order held, do the tulips offer themselves for the finer judgment of touch. Chapter 3. Checking tulips for soft necks and setting aside the bent stems. The stallkeeper's hand stays on the bucket rim a moment longer, and yours follows after it. Not to copy exactly, but because attention has already narrowed there. The row is straight now. Aprons are tied. The broad work has been done. What remains is closer work, the kind that fits into the hands. The tulips stand in a white enamel bucket near the front edge of the stall, their leaves slick and cool, their colors a little lowered by the morning light. Nothing is bright in the gray that comes in from the riverside. Red is wine dark. Yellow is muted in the gray light. Pink goes almost pearly where the petals curve inward. Beneath the awning, the blooms lean and recover in their own slight ways, and the water around their stems gives a faint, shifting sound when the bucket is touched. The stallkeeper lifts one stem and passes it to you. That is all the instruction you receive. You take the tulip just below the leaves. The stem is colder than your fingers expect. It has that dense, wet smoothness cut flowers keep for a while. Not slippery exactly, but sealed with water. You raise it to eye level, then lower it again, because the judgment is not really made by looking. You bring your fingers to the neck, just under the bloom, and feel there, lightly at first, then with a little more certainty. The place is easy to find once you know where it is. Just below the cup of petals, where the stem narrows and begins to carry the weight of the flower. A fresh one feels firm and springy, with a clean resistance under your thumb. A tired one gives differently. Not broken, not ruined, only softened. A bend beginning. A place where the bloom will soon bow farther than the stem can elegantly bear. You test this first stem and feel that it still has its strength. The neck is sound. You glance up. The stall-keeper has already turned to the next bucket, sorting leaves from the waterline with 2 fingers. But when you place the tulip back among the taller stems, they give the smallest nod, as if that is right. So the morning becomes this. You lift one tulip after another. You feel the neck below each bloom. Firm, firm, slightly softened, firm again. One just beginning to bend. You begin to understand that the task is not to divide good flowers from bad ones. It is only to notice what each stem can still do without strain. The bucket is deep enough that the lower leaves brush your wrist when you reach in. Water cools the side of your hand. Once in a while, a leaf edge drags across your skin with a faint, waxy squeak. The petals themselves are drier than the stems, almost powdery on the outside, though the inner folds keep a little chill. You move more slowly than you need to. There is no reason not to. Beyond the awning edge, a few drops gather and let go one by one. You do not look directly at them every time, but you hear where they land in the stone gutter outside the stall. A light tap, then another after a pause. Somewhere farther off, a cart goes over wet pavement with that hollow, rolling sound the market keeps in the morning, muted by canvas and distance. Across the aisle, cups touch saucers. Coffee and warm milk drift over again. Not strongly, only enough to meet the smell of cut stems and damp paper. You find your own rhythm after the first several flowers. Lift, turn, touch below the bloom. Decide, return, or set aside. The set-aside stems go into a shorter bucket the stall-keeper has nudged near your knee. Its waterline sits lower, and the tulips placed there do not need to stand so tall. They will be useful later in another way. You can already imagine them cut shorter for a squat arrangement, or laid with their heads just above the rim of a shallow bowl, where a bent neck would look like intention rather than fatigue. The thought settles in you with surprising relief. Not every stem must keep the shape it had yesterday. One tulip, striped red and cream, feels uncertain in your fingers. The neck is not fully soft, not entirely firm. You hesitate, and the stall-keeper notices without seeming to have watched. They reach out, and you place the flower into their hand. They test the same place with thumb and forefinger, then lower the stem into the shorter bucket. No explanation, just placement. You nod, though there is no need. The lesson is clear enough in the motion itself. better there. Better not to ask it for height it no longer wants to carry. You continue. The next few are easier because of that one. You begin to trust the information arriving through your fingertips before your mind starts sorting it into words. You learn to notice early. The stem tells you before the bloom does. The stallkeeper draws another bucket a little closer, making room as the sorted tulips separate into their new groups. Enamel taps stone with a neat, contained sound. The rows you made earlier still hold, handles turned in, gaps even. There is comfort in seeing the order remain while the work grows more detailed. A yellow tulip opens wider than the others when you lift it, showing the dark center tucked inside. You feel its neck and find it perfectly firm. But for a second, your attention stays with the flower itself. The inner black star, dusted at the edges with pollen. The petals thick as folded satin. The stem pale where it has been underwater. Then you return it to the taller bucket and move on. Some stems have a slight curve lower down. Nothing to do with the neck at all. Those you leave alone. A tulip can carry a line through the stem and still stand well enough. It is only that one narrow place beneath the bloom that matters here. You learn to isolate it with your fingers, to ignore what does not concern the task. There is a kind of rest in that too, in not needing to judge the whole flower at once. The gray light shifts almost imperceptibly, not brighter exactly, but more spread out. From the sen side, the morning comes in through the damp awning and the green painted ironwork in a flatter wash now, silvering the rims of the buckets and catching at the veins in the tulip leaves. A trampling brightness would have been wrong for this hour. The light stays flat and cool. You come to a cluster of pale pink tulips whose petals are still tightly gathered. Their necks vary more than their blooms suggest. One is strong. One has already begun to fold. One more feels sound until the last second, when your thumb finds a softness hidden under the cool skin of the stem. Into the shorter bucket it goes. Into the taller bucket, back with its neighbors. Then another to the shorter one. It is satisfying in a way that has nothing to do with perfection. The market seems full of such adjustments this morning. Buckets straightened, aprons tied. Space made where yesterday there had only been abundance. Each thing placed where it can manage best. The stallkeeper takes a softened tulip from the shorter bucket, holds it against a lower vase already waiting on the work table, and trims an inch from the air with 2 fingers to show you the future shape. A lower arrangement, a simpler line. The bloom still useful, perhaps even better there. Then they set it back in water for now. You find yourself breathing in time with the repetition. Reach into cool water, lift, turn, thumb below the bloom, decide. Your shoulders loosen without your noticing exactly when. The dampness in the apron front from leaning against the buckets is no longer cold. It has warmed to you. One leaf sticks briefly to the back of your hand and falls away. Somewhere behind the stallkeeper, paper settles with a crisp little sigh where a stack of craft sleeves has shifted on the shelf. The red-handled shears remain on their folded linen square farther down the table, untouched for the moment, vivid against the grayness around them. Their turn will come later. For now, this task needs only your hands. Another uncertain stem. This time, you know before you think. The neck yields slightly, enough that the bloom would droop by midday if left among the tall ones. You place it in the shorter bucket at once and feel the ease of not second-guessing yourself. The stallkeeper notices that too. They do not look up, but they move a small bowl from beneath the table to the nearer shelf, as if preparing for the flowers that will eventually be floated there. A shallow bowl, cream-colored inside, broad enough for several bent tulips to rest, with their heads just above the water. You picture them later, stems shortened, blooms opening wider in that lower arrangement, and the image settles over the morning like another practical fact. A few customers pass somewhere beyond the aisle, their steps softened by the wet stone. But none pause here yet. Selling has not quite begun, not in spirit, even if the market is open. This hour still belongs to setting things right. You work through the second half of the bucket. The tulips are cooler deeper in the water. Your fingertips go faintly numb, then adjust. One white bloom has a green flame up the center of each petal. One orange one carries a crease from having pressed too long against another stem after the festival. Most are still sound. Enough are bending that the shorter bucket begins to look purposeful rather than secondary. A place can become honorable very quickly once it is used with care. Again, the stallkeeper reaches over and alters only one of your choices. A dark red tulip you had, returned to the tall bucket, is lifted back out and moved to the lower one. They touch the neck with one finger, not correcting so much as showing you the exact degree of give they mean. Slightly more than you had thought, slightly less than collapse. You feel it again after they hand it back. And this time, the distinction is plain. You are grateful for teaching done this way. No speech to pin the lesson down too tightly. Just the stem itself and the hand learning by contact. Outside, another run of droplets slides from the awning edge. This time, several fall close together, ticking into the gutter in a short series before stopping. The sound makes you think of counting without numbers. The market has many such small measures in it. Bucket rims aligned, handles turned in, stems sorted by touch, paper stacked square. Nothing grand enough to call ceremony, though it comes near. At last, only a few tulips remain in the first bucket. You lift a purple one, almost black in this light, and find the neck strong. Then a white one, softened enough for the bowl. Then the final stem, yellow with a petal just beginning to loosen at the edge. Its neck is firm. You set it back among the tall flowers and watch the bucket settle into its new balance. The stallkeeper comes beside you. Together, you look down into both buckets without speaking. In the taller one, the tulips stand straighter because they are not carrying those that would soon bow. In the shorter one, the bent stems no longer look misplaced. They look chosen for another form. The difference is modest, but unmistakable. The buckets make more sense now. The stallkeeper slides the shorter bucket a little farther under shelter, where the air stays cooler. Then they tap the rim of the taller one with a fingernail and move on to the next cluster of stems waiting on the table. You dry your fingers on the apron and reach for another tulip from a second bucket, already knowing where to touch first. Outside, Paris keeps to its gray morning. Under the awning, the work narrows and continues. Chapter 4. Stripping rows. Thorns and recutting the stems on a long slant. The last of the tulips settle into their separate buckets, and the stallkeeper shifts them aside to bring the roses forward. They come in a deeper weight of color than the tulips had. Market reds darkened by the weather. Cream petals with the faintest tea stain at the edges. Pinks that have gone cooler in the morning light. Their leaves are denser, their stems more various. Some are straight and clean, others still carry thorns low down, or a side shoot that would only drink from the main stem. The bucket water smells greener here, with that particular scent cut roses have when they have traveled a little and then rested overnight. The stallkeeper sets down a pair of thorn strippers beside you. Dull green plastic, shaped to fit the hand without ceremony. The stallkeeper takes up one rose, places the stripper around the stem, just below the bloom, and draws it down in one smooth pass. Thorns and lower leaves come away together. Then the stem is lifted clear, examined for a moment, and set across the rim of an empty pail. No explanation follows. None is needed. You pick up the next rose. The stem is cool and firmer than the tulips were. The skin slightly waxed, interrupted by sharp points, and the joints where leaves branch out. You fit the green plastic around it and test the pressure first, not wanting to bruise the stem. Then you pull downward. The motion is steadier than forceful. A few leaves strip free at once. 2 thorns resist and remain. You go back for those with a shorter pass, and this time they give way with a dry little tick against the plastic. The work changes the sound around you. Tulips had made almost none. Roses answer in tiny catches and slips. The drag of plastic over stem. The fall of leaves into a shallow crate. The tap of a cleaned stem laid against metal. Across the aisle, a cup meets its saucer. Somewhere farther down the covered row, someone shakes out a sheet of paper, and it crackles once before settling. You find a pace for it. Lift, place, draw down. Turn the stem in your fingers. Clear the lower half. Set it aside. Lift, place, draw down. The motions repeat until they stop feeling new. Your shoulders lower a fraction without your noticing at first. The hand holding the rose learns how far below the head to grip it. enough to steady the stem without pressing the outer petals. Your thumb begins to avoid the thorns before your mind names them. The stall keeper works beside you in the same rhythm, not matching you exactly, not trying to teach by demonstration now, only continuing. From time to time, one of your stems is taken up and turned once in the light, then put back with the others. If anything needs changing, it is changed by the hand itself. One missed thorn stripped away, one leaf node left intact because it sits above the waterline and does no harm. You learn the standard by repetition. The roses gather in one cleaned row across the bucket rims, and the stripped leaves collect below in a dark, damp pile. A few carry that familiar peppery scent released when the stem skin is disturbed. One has a petal already loosening near the outer edge. It falls while you are turning the flower, dropping without drama onto the folded linen square where the shears rest. The shears have been near you all morning, though not yet in your hand. Red handles, blades shut, lying on the square of linen, as if the cloth were part of the tool. The linen keeps them from the wet tabletop, and perhaps also marks the place they return to between uses. The fallen petal sits against the pale fold with a little curve still in it. Before either of you reaches for the shears, the stall keeper brushes the petal away with the back of one finger. It slides to the boards and joins the rest of the morning's small remnants. Then the stall keeper lifts the shears. Even that has a sequence. The blades are opened once and closed again, tested more than checked. A cloth appears from the apron pocket and passes along the metal to dry what the damp air has laid there. Only then is the first stem cut. The rose is held low over a bucket, and the shears take off the end in a long slant, not a blunt chop, not a short angle, a long diagonal that opens more drinking surface to the water. The cut piece drops into the bucket with a small plink. The stem follows at once, lowered into fresh water before the cut can seal over with air. Then the shears are wiped again and set back on the linen. The stall keeper places them nearer your hand. You take up a rose that has already been stripped. Its end is darkened from yesterday's cut, no longer fresh enough. You hold it over the bucket as you saw a moment ago. Feel for the point where the stem is still firm and green, and fit the shears around it. The handles are warmer than the blades. The metal gives a clean resistance and then passes through. The slanted end drops away. You lower the rose into water. It is a very small action, but it has a rightness to it. The fresh cut goes straight into water. You wipe the blades dry before laying them down. That, too, becomes part of the motion. Lift from linen. Cut. Lower stem into water. Wipe. Return. The shears remain on the folded square between uses, and you begin to understand the care with which the stall keeper treats the red handles. It is enough to know the place they return to, and that they go back to it dry. You continue. Some stems are thick and need a firmer hand. Some are narrow and cut almost effortlessly. One rose has a slight bend lower down, and the stall keeper takes that one from you, trims it shorter than the rest, and places it in a separate bucket without comment. Another has a bruised outer guard petal, and you remove it with a thumbnail, peeling it away from the base so the tighter petals inside show cleanly. The discarded petal is cool and velvety against your finger before it drops into the crate. The market brightens by degrees beyond the awning, though the light stays pearl gray. From the Seine side, the day filters in through damp air and painted ironwork, and every metal edge looks a little flatter for it. The bucket rims, the shears, the wet stone underfoot. All of it catches light without gleam. A cart goes by at some distance, wheels rolling over the uneven street with a softened wooden rattle. Then the sound passes on. You strip another stem. This one leaves a faint green wetness on the inside of the plastic tool. You wipe it on the edge of the grate and continue. They clear the lower stem quickly. A few thorns still need taking off individually, especially where the stem narrows under the head. For those, you pinch and snap them sideways with your nail, or scrape them off with a careful edge of the stripper. The stem must stay unbroken. That is the judgment in it. Enough pressure to clear, not enough to crush. You begin to feel where that line is. The stall keeper says your name only once, or perhaps not even that. Only a low sound to draw your attention, and points with 2 fingers to a bucket nearer the back of the row. These roses are thirstier than the others. Heads slightly heavier. Leaves not wilted exactly, but asking for fresh cuts sooner. You bring them forward, one by one. Strip, cut on the slant. Into water. Strip, cut, into water. The shears open and close. The cloth passes over the blades. The cleaned stems knock lightly against enamel. Paper from another stall gives a brief rustle. Coffee drifts over with warm milk in it, and then the scent thins again into leaf, stem, rain, and the faint iron note of wet market tables. You become aware of your hands in a different way than before. Not tired exactly, occupied. The pads of your fingers cool from the stems, and then warm again around the shears handles. Once, a thorn catches the side of your index finger before you have stripped it, leaving a sting so small it hardly rises to pain. You put the finger briefly to the bucket water, more from habit than need, and then keep going. The cold settles it immediately. The stall keeper reaches for the cloth after you finish a cut and folds it once more precisely, making a narrower strip for drying the blades. Then it is set beside the linen square. Another tiny adjustment. Another way of keeping things from spreading wider than they need to. You notice, as the work continues, that the roses begin to stand differently in their buckets after recutting. It may be only that you are looking more closely now. Still, the heads seem less burdened by yesterday. The stems sit deeper, and the leaves above the waterline look cleaner once the lower growth has been removed. The recut helps them drink. That logic suits the morning. Not every stem needs to become the tallest thing in the stall. Not every rose needs to last for days. It is enough to pressing each one more able to do what it can still do. Open a little more. Travel a little farther. Sit in a jar on a table somewhere beyond the market and keep its shape through the afternoon. You cut another slant, longer this time, and the stall keeper glances over, then gives the faintest nod. The work itself tells you when it has gone right. The cut is clean. The stem drinks. The shears are dried and placed back on the linen in the same position as before. Handles angled toward the hand that will next use them. A few outer petals gather on the tabletop and are brushed away as they fall. Leaves collect in the crate until the crate smells green and damp and slightly bitter. The cleaned roses fill 2 buckets now, then part of a third. Their heads make a low, uneven line, some cupped tightly, some beginning to loosen. The colors sit together under the awning without brightness, muted by the weather into something richer. At last, there is a pause long enough for the stall-keeper to gather the shears in one hand and wipe them more carefully, from hinge to tip. You do the same with the thorn strippers, rinsing the green plastic under a trickle from a jug and shaking off the water. Not put away yet, only cleared. The shears go back onto the folded linen square, blades closed. The cloth lies beside them. For a moment, neither of you reaches for the next task. You stand with the smell of cut roses around you and look down the row you have made. Stems stripped clean where they need to be clean. Ends freshly slanted. Leaves lifted above the water. Buckets less crowded than before. Beyond the stall, under the green painted ironwork, someone passes with a folded umbrella tucked under one arm. Across the aisle, another cup touches down on a saucer with that small, bright note of porcelain. Then the stall-keeper slides one refreshed bucket a little nearer the front, making room on the table for what comes next. And your hand goes almost automatically to the apron, drying your fingers before you reach. Chapter 5. Misting the buckets and waking the petals without startling them. Then your hand goes to the apron, drying your fingers before you reach. And what comes next is water. Not more cutting, not more sorting for the moment. Yesterday left the flowers thirsty. The roses you have cleaned stand together in their bucket, with their newly opened ends below the surface. And the tulips are already divided by what they can still do. The stall-keeper glances once over the row, then picks up the spray bottle from beside a stack of nested sleeves. It is plain, clear plastic, clouded a little from use. The trigger is slightly flattened and cloudy with use. They set it near your hand and move on to another bucket without a word. For a beat, you wait for the rest of the instruction. For which bucket first? How much? What to leave alone? None comes. They have already turned away. This part belongs to you now, as naturally as the apron does, and the handoff startles you. You lift the bottle, and feel the coolness of the water inside shift against your palm. The trigger gives with a faint resistance, then loosens. Before you spray anything, you look the way they have been looking all morning. Not quickly, not to judge, only to see what is there. Bucket by bucket, stem by stem. The stall has begun to recover its shape after yesterday's excess. Crushed leaves have been cleared away. The paper sleeves lie in a neater stack. The thorn strippers are no longer in use. At the center of the table, the red-handled shears rest again on their folded linen square. Blades dried before being set down. The first bucket you tend is tulips. Their leaves are cool and slick, and when you touch the water with 2 fingers, it is colder than the air under the awning. You stir it only enough to move what has settled. A slow turn around the stems, a dim green smell rising as the water shifts. The tulips sway in one direction and then back. Not all at once, but in a delayed sequence, as if each stem receives the motion and passes it along. A pale yellow bloom brushes your wrist. You lift the bottle and mist above them rather than directly into their faces, letting the spray descend in a fine drift. It catches for an instant in the gray light from the riverside, then disappears onto petals and leaves. The change is slight. One head that had been listing toward the bucket rim no longer leans quite so far. A petal edge curled inward from yesterday's long day loosens by a fraction. The leaves look rinsed rather than wet. That is enough. You do not soak them. The point is only to wake the surface, not to burden it. You move to the roses. These buckets smell greener, sharper where the stems were recut. A few loosened petals float at the surface, tea-colored at the edges, and you gather them out with your fingertips before stirring the water. The stems knock once against enamel, with a note like a spoon set down in a sink, then settle. You mist over the heads of the roses in a broad pass, then again from the other side, so the inner petals catch a little of it too. Tiny beads gather along the outermost petals and at the points of the sepals. One cream rose, tired at the rim, but still full in the center, seems to lift by almost nothing at all. You notice because your eyes have adjusted to this scale now. A stem half an inch shorter, a neck slightly softened, a petal edge less dry than before. The stallkeeper is working at the far end of the table, checking water levels in the taller buckets. They tilt one pail just enough to pour a little off into another, then set both down with care so the handles do not clatter. Their apron is darker in places where it has picked up stray dampness. You no longer need to watch for instruction. When one bucket is done, you move to the next. When a leaf has fallen, you remove it. When the surface looks stale, you stir. You know what to do next without asking, and the realization steadies you more than praise would have done. There are lisianthus near the middle, their petals folded in thinner, more papery layers than the roses, and they take the mist differently. Water settles on them in smaller points, bright for a moment, and then gone. Beside them stand ranunculus, some still tight, some opening into those many gathered layers that look almost too intricate to be made of anything so temporary. You spray above them in a wider arc, and the scent that rises is cooler than the roses, less sweet, closer to green stems and cut leaves. Your sleeve brushes the rim of the bucket and picks up a damp crescent at the cuff. At the back edge of the table, a cluster of shorter stems has been gathered for later use in posies. Their cut ends are in a low container where the water barely covers them. You refresh these too, because thirst begins quickly once a stem is shortened. The spray lands on brownish leaves, on a few late festival carnations, on sprigs of filler green that still smell faintly of pepper and sap. Here the bottle's trigger creaks once under your fingers. You shift your grip, and it smooths out again. The stall keeper comes near enough to replace one bucket with another, and for a moment, you work side by side in the same square of space. Their sleeve brushes your elbow. They take up a white enamel pail, test its weight, and add water from a larger can kept below the table. The stream goes in steadily, not from very high, so the surface does not slap. You notice the practiced angle of the wrist, the way they stop before the line reaches too close to the rim. Then they slide the pail back into place and move away again, leaving behind the mineral smell of fresh water and stems. You continue down the row. Some flowers need only the water below them checked and turned. Others benefit from the air itself being cooled a little around their petals. You begin to feel the distinction in your hand before you would have known how to name it. Tulips can take the finer drift. Roses appreciate a little more. The papery flowers need restraint. You work by what you see after each pass, whether the bloom brightens or bows, whether the leaf surface looks rinsed or burdened. It is practical, and because it is practical, it steadies the mind. A draft enters from the aisle where the awning lifts slightly at one corner. It brings in the river-cold note of the morning and carries the mist back against your knuckles. Your skin cools, then warms again as you close your hand around the bottle. The muscles across your shoulders, which had been lifted without your noticing while you worked over the roses, lower a fraction. You become aware of your feet planted on the damp stone, one a little ahead of the other for balance. The apron tie presses lightly at your waist. You're still tired, but the work has steadied you. You set the spray bottle down to change the water in one smaller bucket where the surface has gone cloudy. The stall keeper notices without remark and nudges an empty pail toward you with the side of a shoe. You gather the stems in one hand, feeling their cool thickness against your palm, and lift them clear while you pour off the old water into the empty bucket. A few bubbles cling to the cut ends. You refill from the can below, lower the stems back in, and watch the water rise around them. A ranunculus that had looked dulled by the film on the old surface shows its color again at once. Apricot deepening toward the center, instead of sitting flat and tired. You missed the blooms after, just once, and set the bottle upright again. This is how the morning begins to include you fully. Not by announcement, not by any special task, but by the absence of interruption. When you reach for a bucket, it is because it needs reaching for. When you set a stem straighter, no one checks the angle after you. The stall-keeper works a little farther away now, wrapping something in tissue for later. And the shared silence has altered from careful to familiar. You could almost think you have stood here on many mornings, under these same green beams and damp awnings, with the same pale light entering from the Seine side and resting on the rims of pails. A few more buckets, and the flowers look fresher. The petals are less drawn. Leaves sit cleaner on their stems. The surfaces of the buckets, once still in that tired post-festival way, have all been touched and turned. Even the pails sound different when moved now, fuller and steadier. You come at last to a bucket of mixed leftover stems near the front, the sort that may become hand-tied posies later, once the morning advances. There are short roses among them, a ranunculus with one outer petal torn, a few tulips with bend enough for lower work, sprigs of green, and 2 lisianthus stems that still have several buds to give. You stir the water carefully so the shorter stems do not slip under one another. Then mist them from above. Brown craft paper lies nearby in a squared stack, and beyond it, the clear water picks weight in their box for flowers that will travel. Not yet, you think. First this. First waking what remains. The stall-keeper returns, not to correct anything, only to stand beside the front bucket and look along the line with you. Their hand rests for a moment on the table edge. Water ticks from somewhere outside into the gutter. The coffee smell drifts over once more, fainter now, as if the first cups have already gone out. You both remain there for a breath or two, seeing what the water has done. Then they take one bucket by the handle and shift it a few inches so the spacing is cleaner. You move the next to match without thinking. The fronts align. The leaves no longer tangle from one pail into another. A path of stone shows between the stand and the aisle, dark with damp and newly visible. You pick up the bottle again for one last pass over the roses nearest the front. The spray falls in a thin silver veil and vanishes into petal and leaf. When you lower your hand, the stall-keeper has already turned back to the table where sleeves and paper are stacked. The next work is waiting there in plain sight, and this time you feel ready for it before it is named. For another moment, you stay with the buckets, listening to the faint settling sounds they make after being touched, the water easing back to level, a stem finding room, one leaf sliding against another. Overhead, the awning gives back a few drops from its edge. Beneath it, the flowers stand cooler than before, and the morning under the market has shifted almost imperceptibly from recovery toward use. Then you turn toward the sleeves. Chapter 6. Filling clear water picks and sliding stems into paper sleeves. The stall-keeper reaches below the table and brings up a shallow cardboard tray divided into narrow compartments. In each compartment stands a clear plastic water pick, empty and uncapped, catching the gray light in thin vertical lines. Beside the tray comes a stack of paper sleeves that had been pressed flat after the festival. Some brown craft, some with a lining of pale tissue that makes a drier rustle when it opens. The tray is set near your hands. The sleeves are squared once against the tabletop. Nothing more is said. For another moment, you stay with the sudden appearance of them. Behind the tray, the buckets settle after misting. A rose leaf turns once against the side of its pail and stops. The tulips, sorted by what their necks can still carry, stand in their separate whites and pinks and diluted reds. Beneath the awning, the air has that rinsed smell of stems and metal and damp paper. And beyond the edge of the stall, the stone of the aisle shines darker where the rain has touched it. You understand from the arrangement alone. Some stems are not meant to go back into the buckets to spend the whole morning there. Some stems will need to leave the buckets soon. Thirstier flowers, stems that will need a little reserve of water once they leave the shelter of the stall. Roses especially, and a few lisianthus with their petals still folded inward, as if the day has not fully reached them. Preparing them is not difficult, but it asks for sequence. Fill, cap, sleeve, set aside. The order is satisfying in the same way the earlier work has been satisfying, because each step leaves the flower more ready for another pair of hands. The stall-keeper slides a white enamel jug nearer. It is filled from one of the cleaner buckets, and the water in it is very cold. When you lift the first pick, it weighs almost nothing. Only a shell of clear plastic with a green, rubbery cap attached at the top. You tilt it and pour carefully from the jug. The opening is small enough that your wrist adjusts on its own, searching first, then finding the angle that keeps the stream narrow. Water climbs the tube, brightening it. You let it rise, watching for where to stop. Almost to the top, but not quite. A little air left. Too full, and it will spill when the stem goes in. Not full enough, and the journey will be shorter than it should be. You set the filled pick back into its compartment and take the next one. This, too, becomes repetition quickly, though not at once. The tray gives each tube a place to stand. Your fingers cool from the plastic. The jug's handle presses a pale line into your palm. Every time you pour, there is a tiny note of contact as the water meets the inside of the tube, higher and thinner than the sound of bucket water. You begin to hear the difference between empty and nearly full. Empty has a hollow ring. Nearly full gives back a denser little sound, as if the note has settled lower in the throat. After a few, your hand stops hesitating. Across the aisle, cups touch saucers. Coffee and warm milk drift over under the canvas and mix with the greener smell of cut stems. The market is not fully open yet, not in the brisk daytime sense. Footsteps pass, then do not pass for a while. Somewhere farther down, paper is shaken loose from a bundle and then folded again. The whole row still moves in the language of early morning, where even practical things happen a little more slowly. When the first compartment is filled, the stallkeeper draws a few stems from the refreshed roses and lays them on the table beside you. They have already had their thorns stripped with the dull green tool and their ends recut on a long slant. You can see the fresh, pale interior of each stem where the shears passed through. A rose prepared this way drinks better and travels better. You take one clear pick in your left hand and one rose in your right. The trick is to guide the cut end through the cap without bruising it. Then ease the stem down until the water closes around the slanted cut. The cap grips with a small resistance and then yields. The tube suddenly has purpose once the stem is inside it. Weight gathers at the bottom. The flower balances differently in your hand. The first one goes well. You set it aside and take another. Soon, there is a line of roses with clear feet standing across the table. Each tube bright with water. When you lift them together to move them nearer the sleeves, the picks tap each other with a dry plastic click. A newer sound than the old market sounds of enamel and stone, but not out of place. It belongs to this part of the work. The pick gives the stem water for the walk. The paper sleeves come next. Some are already formed into long, narrow cones. Others need opening from flat. You slip your fingers into one and shake it once. The craft loosens with a crisp, careful rustle, and the tissue inside exhales against the paper with a softer friction. The sound is somehow larger than the movement that makes it. Under the awning, it carries just enough to be heard, and then folds back into the morning. A rose with its water pick slides into the sleeve more easily if the paper is tilted first. The first try catches at the bottom seam. On the next, the bloom brushes the rim. You adjust. Not so upright. Not so low. Then the angle reveals itself in your hands. Enough incline for the pick to find the point of the sleeve. Enough lift that the bloom stays clear. When it is right, the stem descends neatly, the tube settling into place, the bloom held above in its own space. You fold the paper once around it, not tightly, only enough to keep the shape. The tissue gives the petals a little room. The craft provides the outer firmness. You place the finished stem in a crate lined with yesterday's newspaper, and the paper makes a low crackle under its new weight. One by one, the line grows. The stallkeeper works opposite you with the same economy as before, selecting stems that will travel best, setting aside any that should remain in water longer, moving a bunch of lisianthus nearer your side. There is no need to indicate approval. You continue, and the absence of interruption becomes its own form of trust. The lisianthus require a lighter hand. Their stems are thinner than the roses, their blooms less certain in shape. Some open, some still in pointed buds. A water pick suits them well. Once capped, they seem steadier. You slide them into narrower sleeves, tissue first, then paper. Their petals brush your knuckles like cool silk. One pale mauve blossom catches on the edge of the sleeve, and you pause to turn the paper outward before trying again. That tiny adjustment is enough. It goes in without complaint. As you work, you begin to think about carrying. A flower prepared this way is made for movement through streets. You are simply making sure the stem arrives with a little water still at its base and its petals unruffled by the walk. A shape passes across the aisle. Not a person exactly, but the dim, moving outline of one through the gray light and hanging rain at the market's edge. This time, it slows nearer the front of the stall. You register a coat hem, a hand near a pocket, the pause of someone almost deciding. The presence presses lightly against the morning's enclosure, not entering, only testing it. Then it moves on. No one turns to follow it. The row remains inside its preparation a little longer, but the world beyond has come close enough to be felt. You fill more picks. By now, your hands know the measure almost before your eyes check it. A tube held to the light shows a narrow meniscus near the top. You leave a finger's width of air. You set each one back upright. The tray fills. The motion becomes nearly circular. Lift, pour, set down. Take stem, cap, lower. Shake sleeve, slide in, fold. There is comfort in how little each movement needs from thought once it has been learned. At one point, the stallkeeper reaches past you for the jug, and the back of their hand brushes your sleeve. It is only that. A passing contact made necessary by the table's narrowness. But in the close weather under the awning, it registers clearly. Then the jug is on the other side, topping up a few picks there, and the work continues. You find that you have settled more fully onto both feet. The tiredness you arrived with is still present, but it has changed shape. It no longer sits high and diffuse. It has gone lower, into the arms and shoulders, where repetitive work can carry it. A few stems need fresh cuts before they can be capped. The red-handled shears are lifted from their folded linen square. The stallkeeper uses them without waste of motion. One quick, long slant at the base of a rose, then another. After each pair of cuts, the blades are wiped dry before being laid down again. Even here, in the middle of preparation, the habit remains exact. Water and metal are not left to each other longer than necessary. The shears rest for a moment at the edge of the table, red against the gray morning, then disappear below again into their shallow drawer. You continue with the newly cut stems. The crate of sleeved flowers begins to look orderly in a different way from the buckets. Buckets display, sleeves gather. In the buckets, every stem is part of a larger abundance, one color leaning among others. In the crate, each flower becomes singular. A rose in paper is no longer one of 12. It is itself, with its own water, its own fold of tissue, its own destination not yet known. You place them side by side so the blooms do not press together. The paper edges overlap in neat, uneven ridges. The market brightens by degrees, though the light remains pearl gray. From the same side, a wider wash of day reaches under the awning and catches in the clear water picks until they briefly shine more strongly than glass. Then the brightness diffuses again. A drop falls from the canvas edge and darkens the stone near your shoe. Another lands in an empty bucket with a single clean tap. There are tulips, too, that can travel if they are supported correctly. Not the softened ones set aside for shorter use, but the firmer stems, the ones whose necks still hold the bloom upright. These are sleeved without picks if they will be taken quickly. But a few of the more delicate ones receive water after all. Their stems enter the clear tubes with less resistance than the roses. The bloom at the top remains closed enough that the paper can come higher around it. You fold the sleeve to cradle the long neck without forcing it straight. Tulips bruise and bend if wrapped too tightly. The stall-keeper glances over the crate, then places a fresh stack of sleeves nearer your elbow. It is the same kind of gesture as moving the jug, as leaving the apron for you earlier, as setting the tray in front of your hands without explanation. Work is guided here by placement more than by speech. A thing appears where it is needed, and that is enough. You open another sleeve and listen to the paper answer. The sound has become one of the morning's own weather. Not loud, not constant, but returning every few moments, dry against the dampness around it. Craft against tissue, tissue against stem. The tiny click of a capped pick set down beside another. The faint shift of newspaper in the crate. Across the aisle, another cup meets another saucer. Somewhere farther down, a chair leg scrapes once and then stops. It is there in the way the sleeves stack flatter after you square them, in the way each prepared stem can be laid down without rolling, in the way a flower, once given its little water reservoir and paper sheath, looks less exposed to the morning. At last, the tray of empty picks has thinned to only a few. The crate of sleeved stems has risen to meet the eye. Roses, lisianthus, 2 tulips, a spray of something finer and greener that the stall-keeper tucks into tissue with particular care. You fill the final tubes one by one, not hurrying, because there is no reason to. The jug is lighter now in your hand. The cold line it leaves across your palm is less sharp than before, your skin having adjusted to it. When the last pick is filled and capped onto its stem, you slide the flower into paper and fold the sleeve closed with the same measured pressure as the others. Then you set it into the crate among the rest. The paper settles with a muted rustle and becomes still. For a while after that, you remain where you are, hands resting near the tray, looking over what has been prepared. The stall is not transformed. It is simply further along in the morning than it was. In the buckets, flowers continue to drink under the awning. In the crate, a small group is ready to leave when needed. Each stem carries a little pocket of water, a little shield of paper, enough care to cross the aisle, the street, the bridge, to reach rooms you will never see. Beyond the aisle, coffee and warm milk drift through again, and the gray light from the riverside reaches a little farther across the stone. Chapter 7. Looping bind wire and tying raffia around small morning posies. For a little while, you stay with the tray of filled water picks and the sleeved stems set aside in their crate, looking over what has been prepared. The light reaches farther under the awning now, pearl gray on the wet stone and the lower bars of the green painted ironwork. Somewhere across the aisle, a cup meets a saucer with a neat clink, and the smell of coffee and warm milk passes through again, mixing with damp paper, leaf green water, and the faint metal scent that rises from buckets on a cool morning. Now you start making small posies. The stallkeeper reaches below the table and brings up a low stack of brown craft sheets, already cut to wrapping size, their edges aligned by habit rather than measurement. Beside them comes a spool of thin bind wire, dull and narrow as a stem in winter, and a bundle of raffia the color of dry straw after rain. Nothing is announced. The things are simply placed where your hands can find them. A few of the stems are drawn from their buckets and laid on the table in a modest row. A rose with its thorns already stripped. A pair of tulips whose necks are still firm enough for a short bunch. A sprig of lisianthus. Perhaps one ranunculus, not fully open, but willing. You understand at once what the next work will be. Not the larger bouquets from yesterday. Not the festival fullness that needed 2 hands and a broad wrap, but smaller morning posies, the kind someone might carry home in the crook of an elbow along the river, or set in a jar on a kitchen table before the day properly begins. Leftover stems that still make good small posies. Flowers given another shape. The stallkeeper begins with one bundle, and you begin with another. You gather your stems in your left hand first, almost loosely, though not so loosely that they slide apart. A rose near the center for height. Tulips lower, because their heads will keep moving after they leave here and need room to incline where they like. Lisianthus to one side, where its branching can soften the outline. You adjust by touch more than sight at first, feeling where stems cross and where one head presses too hard against another. The cut ends tap lightly on the table as you even them against the grain of the paper beneath. The sound is small and dry and satisfying. For a moment, it seems enough. The bunch sits in your hand with the right proportions, almost casual, almost settled. Then the rose tips forward a fraction. One tulip eases away from the other. The lisianthus, airy a moment ago, begins to make the whole thing feel less shaped than merely gathered. You tighten your fingers slightly, and the stems answer, but only while you hold them so. The stems still need binding. The bind wire comes next. It is thinner than twine, and less forgiving if bent wrongly, but useful in exactly the way it is meant to be useful. You pull a length from the spool and feel the brief resistance before it gives. The wire is cool against your fingertips. You loop it once around the gathered stems, not high where it would pinch the flower heads, not low where the bundle would loosen, but in that middle place a florist finds after doing the same motion enough times. Then you cross the ends, twist them together with 2 measured turns, and flatten the twist along the stems so nothing catches. The posy changes in your hand at once. You make another. This one takes a cream rose with tea-darkened edges. 1 bent tulip saved because it can still do well in a shorter bunch, and 2 stems of finer filler from the back of the pail. You turn the stems in your hand a little as you add each one, building the spiral almost without thinking of the word for it. The cut ends gather in a neat fan below your palm. Again, the bind wire circles them. Again, 2 turns. Again, the shape settles. Across from you, the stall keeper works in the same rhythm, not matching you exactly, but near enough that the sounds begin to answer one another. Stems set down, paper shifted, wire drawn from the spool with a dry little hiss. Raffia pulled through fingers. Sometimes you glance up and see only hands moving. Apron front, the lower edge of the awning behind. It is enough. You do not need instruction now, except in the form already being given. 1 repeated gesture after another. The raffia lies in loose strands, flatter than string, rougher too. When you separate 1 length from the bundle, it catches for a moment against the others, then comes free with a faint straw sound. You run it between finger and thumb to find the smoother side. Around the wired stems it goes, covering what must be covered. 1 tie is not enough. It needs a second pass to sit properly, and a small pull to snug it down. The knot is not decorative. It only has to hold. Yet even this plain fastening changes the look of the posy. The wire disappears beneath it. What was practical becomes nearly invisible. Many things are best like this, doing their work without asking to be seen. The stall keeper reaches for the spool near your side once, sees that you have had to stretch a little to keep it from rolling away, and sets it nearer your elbow. The movement is brief and exact, so small it might be missed by anyone not working here, yet it alters everything within reach. Wood grain, spool edge, your sleeve, all come into a better relation. It is not correction so much as attunement, a quiet noticing of where your hand has had to compensate, and a quiet answer to it. No comment follows. You murmur thanks under your breath, and the work continues. Now, the craft paper. The sheets have their own sound, crisp but not sharp, a drier note than tissue, and a heavier one. When you lift a single sheet, the corner brushes the back of your hand with a fibrous drag. You turn one so it sits like a diamond before you, and place the posy across it. Blooms angled toward the upper point, stems toward the lower. Not centered. A little off, because flowers look too formal when wrapped too squarely. The left side folds in first, then the right over it. The lower point comes up around the stems. You crease only where needed. The paper should keep its body, not be pressed flat. Another length of raffia around the outside, tied where it supports the wrap, without cinching it into stiffness. When you lift the finished posy, it gives that compact, complete feeling certain small, useful things have. A parcel tied well, a drawer set in order, a cup filled nearly to the brim, but not over. The flowers are not hidden. The paper only gathers them. Their heads remain visible above the rim, slightly uneven, as though they have just been brought in from the morning rather than arranged for display. Which, in a way, they have. You set it beside the first one. Soon there are 3, then 5. The table changes as you work. At first, it is a place of separate materials: loose stems, spool, raffia bundle, stack of paper. Gradually, another order appears. A row of completed posies forms near the drier end, each one angled a little differently, each one made from what the buckets could spare. A shorter tulip bunch with a pink rose, a ranunculus tucked low among cream petals, lisianthus making a softer edge where a stricter bunch would have looked too deliberate. The shorter stems suit these smaller bunches. The bent tulips are not pretending to stand tall. The roses, with slightly opened centers, are not being asked to hold for another long day in a festival massing. They are simply being gathered into forms that suit them now. You notice these judgments arriving more quickly in your hands. Which stem belongs where? Which bloom needs room? Which bunch wants one more line of green, and which will do better without it? It is not mastery, not after one morning, but it is enough to make the work smoother. When you reach for a tulip with a softened neck, you no longer think of it as less. You think of the low bowl it might suit, or the short wrap it can still brighten. When a rose opens a fraction more than its neighbors, you place it where that fullness looks generous rather than spent. The stallkeeper does the same beside you. Once, without speaking, they slide 2 stems from your small pile toward the center of the table. One rose too heavy for the posy in your hand. One lisianthus just right to replace it. The correction is so slight, it feels more like a nudge of balance than instruction. You make the exchange. The bunch settles. Nothing more is needed. Rain touches the awning in a brief patter, and then thins again. Not enough to darken what is already dark, only enough to mark the canvas overhead with a sound like fingertips on paper. Beyond the stall, a pair of footsteps pass slowly along the aisle. The person does not stop. A chair across at the café scrapes once, then rests. The market is brighter by degrees now, though the color of the morning stays the same pearl gray it has been since you arrived, with no sun trying to break through, only more of the day filtering under the shelter. You keep making posies. There is comfort in the order of the motions. Gather, turn, add. Tap stems level, loop wire, twist, flatten, lay on paper, fold, tie, set aside. Again, repetition sharpens your hand. Your hands begin to remember, before your mind names each step. The raffia leaves a dry trace across your fingertips. The wire cools the pads of your fingers. The stems dampen your palm where they cross. Once, a tulip leaf slides against the inside of your wrist with that slick, almost waxed texture tulips have. And you think how different each flower is to touch, even when the eye takes them all in at once. A rose petal loosens as you turn one stem and lands on the paper. You lift it away with the back of a finger and set it aside near the spool. Another stem has to be recut slightly because its end has sealed more than the others. The stallkeeper passes you the red-handled shears from their folded linen square for a single snip. And when you are done, you wipe the blades dry before setting them back exactly where they belong. Then the paper returns, the raffia returns, and the shears disappear again into the background of the morning. Important, but not central here. You begin to like the hiddenness of the bind wire more and more. By the time the paper is tied, no one carrying these posies away will see the small loop that gives them shape. They will see flowers, paper, raffia, perhaps a little water darkness near the cut stems. They may think the bunches simply came together neatly on their own, but your fingers know what sits underneath. 2 turns of wire, placed well. Not much. Enough. It seems to you that the morning has been built the same way. A series of unnoticed acts under the visible one. Aprons shaken out. Tulips tested. Roses stripped and cut on the slant. Buckets misted. Water picks filled. Each act slight by itself, and together making the stall look as though it has always been this orderly. The row of finished posies lengthens. The stallkeeper moves 1 or 2 farther along to make room. Their paper rustles against one another with a subdued crackle. Stems knock lightly together beneath the wraps. A few are tied with the raffia knot facing front, a few to the side. None of it matters enough to correct. They are morning flowers, not ceremony flowers. Their neatness comes from care, not symmetry. At one point, you pause to flex your hand. Not from strain, exactly. Only from having held the same gathering shape for a while. Your fingers open and close once. The dampness from the stems cools the center of your palm. Then you reach for another small handful. 1 rose, 1 tulip, 1 tulip, a branch of lisianthus, a bit of green to lift the line. Already you know where the wire will sit before you cut it. Across the aisle, fresh milk is being poured into something hot. You can tell by the scent changing, sweeter for a moment before coffee comes through again. The awning edge drips into the stone gutter beyond the stall in a patient interval. Somewhere farther down under the ironwork, paper is being shaken open at another stand. The whole market has entered that part of morning when preparation and selling begin to overlap. Though here, in your narrow section beneath the canvas, the work still belongs mostly to arrangement. When at last you look up for more than a second, the table has altered completely. What had been remnants and sorted stems is now a series of compact bundles in brown paper, each one ready to be lifted, carried, chosen. The stall-keeper is tying another at your side, head bent, hands moving with the same measured economy as before. There is no need to compare your work to theirs. The row itself is enough proof that your gestures have joined the rhythm of the stall. You pick up one finished posy and feel its weight settle into your hand. The slight pull of water in the stems, the firmness of the hidden wire, the rasp of raffia against the paper, the coolness where the cut ends press through the lower fold. Then you set it down with the others, close enough that the wraps touch and make one more low paper sound. And after that, almost before the motion has fully become thought, you reach for another sheet. Chapter 8. Setting small pots on pebble trays in the cool back of the stall. And after that, you reach for another sheet. The brown paper gives a dry crackle under your fingers, less crisp now than it was earlier. Having taken some of the morning damp into itself, you smooth it flat on the table with the heel of your hand. A rose, 2 tulips, a stem of lisianthus, a ranunculus not yet fully opened. Bind wire first, cool and thin against your fingertips, then raffia drawn around the stems and tied where the wire will disappear beneath paper. By now, you know the order. You do not need to look toward the stall-keeper to know the order of them. Your hands have learned enough to continue. One posy joins the others in a shallow crate lined with yesterday's newspaper. The wrapped bundles lie shoulder to shoulder, their paper sleeves making a low rustle whenever one is set down beside another. A tulip leaf, slick with mist, sticks briefly to your wrist and then lets go. You peel it away and tuck the leaf back into the fold of its bouquet where it belongs. The front of the stall remains ever brighter, though only by degrees. Gray light comes in from the riverside and catches on bucket rims, on damp stone, on the folded lip of a paper sleeve. Here, farther back, the air changes. The back of the stall is cooler and greener. The stall-keeper lifts the crate of finished posies and sets it nearer the front without a word. In the space it leaves behind, you can see farther into the rear of the stall than before. Stacked black nursery trays, a low shelf with spare paper, a cluster of smaller pots gathered where the canvas overhead dips lowest and drips least. Near them sit 2 shallow metal trays already filled with pebbles, the stones dark from water. The stall-keeper passes behind you, close enough that the apron brushes your sleeve, then touches 2 fingertips to the rim of one tray and to the smallest pots after that. It is hardly more than a gesture. Then they move away again, returning to the buckets and paper at the front. The task is yours. You carry the first pot back with both hands around its plastic sides. It holds a compact mound of leaves and one late bloom, pale pink with petals layered tight at the center. The pot is cool and faintly damp. Soil has dried at the rim in a thin brown line. When you set it down among the pebbles, the base settles with a tiny click against stone, raised just above the water shining below. That is the point of these trays. The roots stay out of standing water, but the air around them cools. You can feel it when you lower your hand near the pebbles. Cool air rises from the wet pebbles. It reminds you, for a moment, of arranging plants on an indoor sill after rain, when the window pane still carries a little chill, and the room smells faintly of wet dust and leaves. You bring another pot, and another. Some are herbs left over from a festival display, their labels gone soft and unreadable. Some are little flowering things meant for a windowsill or a narrow table, sold yesterday in greater numbers than they will be sold today. One has a broken stem already cut away cleanly. Another leans to one side, where it has grown toward light. None of that matters much here. You are only finding them a steadier place for the morning. The pebbles are smooth and variously shaped. Some no larger than beans, some broad as coins. Their colors deepen underwater: slate, cream, river brown, a muted green that almost matches the painted ironwork overhead. You nudge one tray a fraction farther from the crate behind it, so the leaves of the smallest pots have room to spread. A few pebbles shift and settle with a faint mineral sound. From the aisle comes a softened cup clink, then the smell of coffee and warm milk moving under the canvas. It reaches even this far back, though thinned by leaves and damp paper, and the greener breath of cut stems. Somewhere beyond the awning edge, a cart passes over wet stone again, the wheels making that long, rounded sound that rises and fades without haste. From here, it seems farther away than before, as if the rear of the stall has its own distance from the street. Ranunculus are stored close by, in a deeper bucket near the back post, where the light stays dimmer. Their heads tilt in several directions at once, petals packed densely like folded silk. Beside them stand lisianthus, their buds and open cups mixed together on branching stems, mauve and cream and white with green throats. Market roses occupy the next bucket over, recut stems drinking well now, their outer guard petals still carrying the memory of yesterday's handling. You notice all this while lifting pots from one place to another. A small terracotta pot leaves a ring of moisture on your palm. It holds a violet no higher than your thumb, with two flowers open and one turned inward, as if still deciding. You turn it slightly before setting it down, arranging its fuller side toward the aisle, though no customer has yet come to stand there. Beside it goes a squat herb in a chipped black pot, all mint dark leaves, except for one pale new pair at the center, soft as if they have only just uncurled. Habit begins to enter your movements. Not performance exactly, more like the satisfaction of making things face the direction they can best be seen from, even if no one looks for a while. The stall-keeper at the front shakes out a fresh stack of craft sleeves. The sound reaches you in short, dry bursts. Then paper is folded. Stems tap lightly against the table edge. A bucket is moved half an inch and set down. You do not need to see any of it. Here at the back, Your own sounds are smaller. Pot lifted, pot set down, pebbles adjusted. A sleeve of leaves brushed free of a droplet. The work narrows until your attention fits inside the space of your hands. One of the trays has less water than the other. You find the white enamel jug from earlier, tucked beneath the back shelf, still cool where the metal has not yet taken on the day's temperature. When you pour, you do it slowly, not onto the pots, but into the pebbles themselves, letting the water thread between stones until a shallow shine appears below the bases. The sound is almost nothing, just a brief trickle, and then a change in the tray's brightness. A bead of water gathers where two pebbles touch. It swells there for a moment, round and clear, then slips down between them and catches the gray light before it disappears. You watch it longer than the action requires. The market gives you many such things this morning. A petal loosening after mist, a tulip neck yielding under your fingertips, the neat twist of wire hidden beneath raffia, water finding its level among stones. You set the jug back under the shelf, with its handle turned outward for the next reach. That exactness has entered you too. Not rigidly, more as a relief. Things returned where the hand expects them, save a little effort later. And the morning has been built from little savings of effort, one after another. The smallest pots go onto the second tray. Some have leaves no bigger than thumbnails, with pale veining visible when you tilt them toward the light. One carries a single white flower, no larger than a coin. Its petals so thin they seem cut from paper. Another is all leaf and no bloom, but the leaves are glossy and healthy, and that is enough. You space them so no foliage presses too hard against its neighbor. Where one pot sits unevenly on the pebbles, you lift it and turn it a little until it rests level. Your shoulders lower without your deciding to lower them. The back of your neck, which had held some remnant of early cold beneath the awning, loosens as you work here among the trays. The air near the pebbles brushes the backs of your fingers each time you move a pot. It is a small sensation, but repeated often enough, it becomes part of the chapter the body is reading for itself. Near the rear post, a crate of spare sleeves leans beneath a shelf, and above it hangs a loop of raffia left from earlier. A few lengths of bind wire lie coiled in a saucer, not forgotten, only set aside until needed again. The deeper you stand in the stall, the more you see that things are kept where they're used. Paper where paper is reached for. String where string is cut. Trays where they can be slid out with one hand while the other still steadies a stem. You realize you've been trusted with the back of the stall. No announcement marks it. No one says so. But the front of a stall is one kind of place, and the back is another. Out front, flowers are arranged for eyes arriving from the aisle. Here, things are kept, refreshed, corrected, given another hour of shade. The work has a household quality in this part of the morning. You are not presenting anything. You are tending what remains. The permission of it moves through you quietly, almost shyly, and settles there to be trusted with what is not on display. To stand where the stall breathes between customers. To touch the things that are kept going. A leaf from one of the little potted plants has yellowed at the tip. You pinch it off cleanly and set it aside on the edge of the tray. Another pot has collected a crescent of spilled soil at its base. You brush the loose crumbs away with your thumb before placing it among the pebbles. These are such small acts that they barely seem like decisions, but they alter the look of things at once. A line straightened, a leaf removed, a pot turned, room made. The awning gives a single drip somewhere behind you, then another. Not rain exactly, only water finding its way from one fold of canvas to the next. The smell that follows is that dark, wet cloth smell of market mornings, mixed with iron and leaf stems and the faint sweetness of roses beginning to warm. You pause with one last pot in your hands. It is lighter than the others and planted with something delicate. A spray of narrow leaves and several buds still closed. Behind the trays, half screened by the bucket of lisianthus, there is a deeper pocket of space where the light falls in a thinner strip. You place the pot there, then draw it forward again by 2 inches, so the buds are not hidden entirely. That seems right. Enough shelter, enough light. When you straighten, the stall keeper glances back once from the front, not checking, just registering the new arrangement, the way one notices a chair moved to a better corner. Their hand lifts briefly from the paper stack and lowers again. Then they continue with whatever stems are in front of them. You remain in the cooler back space a little longer. The trays are full now. Pebbles glisten below the pots. Water visible only in narrow channels and small, bright pockets. Ranunculus breathe out their faint green scent beside you. Lisianthus keep their mixed buds in cups at eye level. The roses stand farther over, darker and more familiar after your hands have stripped and cut them earlier. The back of the stall is in order. And because you are no longer reaching for the next obvious task, your eyes begin to rest on smaller things. A stem tucked behind another stem. A folded newspaper under a crate leg to level it on uneven stone. A single dropped petal caught in the groove of the shelf. The way the gray light from the riverside thins as it comes back here and turns the edges of leaves silver for a second before flattening again. It is in this slower looking that the back of the stall opens further. Not physically, but in attention. Behind the ranunculus bucket, where the crates make a narrow corner and the air stays coolest, there are a few stems you do not remember seeing from the front. Pale, not striking. Their blooms are still closed enough to pass for buds at first glance. You notice them only because they sit at an angle apart from the others, as though they have been placed there without emphasis. You do not pick one up yet. For the moment, you only stand near the pebble trays, with dampness cooling your fingers, and let your gaze settle there among the ordinary flowers at the back. Across the aisle, a saucer meets a cup with a small porcelain note. Somewhere nearer the entrance, paper crackles around a bouquet. Under the green painted ironwork and the dim awning light, the little pots rest above their shallow water. Still, your eyes return to those stems. Pale is not quite the word for them. Not white, not green, not the washed cream of lisianthus buds before they open. Something in their color seems to hold back from the light, rather than take it. And the closed heads give you no help. They remain there, quiet and separate, familiar enough to belong among flowers, and yet not yielding their name. Chapter 9. Finding the small, lucky flowers with silver centers in warm hands. For a moment, you only stand near the pebble trays, with dampness cooling your fingers, and let your gaze settle there, among the ordinary flowers at the back. Across the aisle, a saucer meets a cup with a small porcelain note. Somewhere nearer the entrance, paper crackles around a bouquet. Under the green painted ironwork and the dim awning light, the little pots rest above their shallow water, and the morning goes on arranging itself by inches. The back of the stall is darker than the front by only a shade or two, but after the brighter aisle, it feels cooler and dimmer than the front. Ranunculus sit in low buckets, with their layered heads turned in different directions, some tight as buttons, some opening enough to show the folded geometry inside. Lisianthus rise in thinner lines, branching and pale at the tips. Market roses stand among them in deeper reds and creams, their recut stems drinking from greenish water. There are crates under the shelf, spare paper above, and the faint mineral smell that comes from wet stone cooling under cover. You reach to straighten one of the smaller pots on its pebbles, and notice, beside the rim of a bucket, a stem you do not remember seeing before. It is easy to miss at first. The leaves are plain enough, matte green and narrow, and the bud is no larger than the end of your thumb. Only the color catches you. Not white exactly, not pink, but a pale blush with a little cream in it. You touch it because it is there, because your hands are already occupied with stems and damp pots and paper, and because that is what the whole morning has been made of. One thing after another, lifted, checked, set right. The stem is cool near the cut end, and warmer near the bud, where your fingers close. You turn it slightly, expecting perhaps to find it bruised or folded behind another bloom. Instead, the petals loosen. Not quickly. Nothing here does anything quickly. The bud gives by fractions, as if remembering an old instruction. One outer petal eases away from another. Then the center shows itself. A pale silver point, hardly brighter than the gray light, but distinct enough that you stop moving for a breath and look more closely. Your thumb rests against the stem. The petals continue their small opening, no larger than a coin now, and the silver center catches what little light reaches the back of the stall. At the front, a bucket is shifted. You hear the enamel tap the stone and settle. The stallkeeper does not call you back. Across the aisle, coffee drifts over again with warm milk in it. And then the smell is gone into the greener scent of leaves. Rain ticks once or twice on the canvas and stops. You look around the bucket where you found the stem. There, among the ranunculus and lisianthus, are two more buds like it, tucked so naturally between ordinary flowers that they seem at first like some half-seen variety left over from yesterday's abundance. One leans against a rose stem stripped of its thorns. Another lies almost hidden where leaves cross over the rim. Their petals are closed, their color that same pale in-between shade. And now that you have noticed them, you cannot quite understand how your eyes passed over them before. You lift one. Again, the warmth of your hand seems to matter. The bud softens under your fingers, not in the way a tired tulip neck softens, not as damage, but as if a knot in cloth were being untied from the inside. The petals part enough to show the faint silver center. It is not shiny like foil or wet metal. It is softer than that, like the underside of a fish scale, or the line of light on the Seine when the sky is still clouded and the river catches brightness anyway. The stallkeeper appears beside you without sound enough to mark the approach. You glance up, half expecting some explanation, some name offered in the low, practical voice you have barely heard all morning. But there is only the briefest look from the stem in your hand to your face, and then to the bucket again. They give a small shrug. Their hand reaches past yours and takes a little enamel cup from the shelf. It is white inside, blue at the lip, chipped on one side where the glaze is gone. They set it near your wrist on the work surface and move away again toward the front, where a sleeve of craft paper needs folding flatter. The whole exchange takes only a few seconds. Nothing is named. Nothing is made larger throughout it is. You look back to the blossom in your hand. Opened this way, it is almost modest. 5 petals, perhaps 6, depending on how you count the smallest inner fold. The silver center sits faint and matte, not glittering, just present. You set the stem into the enamel cup. The water in the cup is shallow and cold. The flower nods once as the cut end finds the bottom. Against the white interior, the pale petals look a little more distinct. The silver center remains subdued, visible only when you lean nearer. You place the cup just beyond the pebble trays, where it will not be knocked by your sleeve. Then, because there is still work to do, and because work has become the shape of thought here, you turn back to the bucket and continue sorting. Not every pale bud opens in your hand. Some are only lisianthus, not yet fully out, their green sepals still cupping the petals. Some are ranunculus, with outer petals bleached by the dim light. You find yourself learning by touch rather than sight. The lucky ones feel a little warmer near the head than the rest, though perhaps that warmth comes from your own palm. Their stems are slender, but not weak. Their leaves are plain enough to disappear among the others. You have to pick them up to know them. One by one, you lift what you suspect, and some remain ordinary, while two more ease open under your fingers. The motions are very small. Thumb and forefinger at the stem, a turning of the wrist, the slight release of petals. It brings to mind the tulips earlier, the way you learned to feel below the bloom for a softened neck. Except this is not a matter of setting aside what cannot stand tall. This is another kind of noticing. Not judgment, not rescue. Simply recognizing what reveals itself only after contact. A chair scrapes once across the aisle, then stops. The sound comes muffled through canvas and stems. Farther out, beyond the market, a cart crosses wet stone with that hollow, rolling note you heard in the first hour of morning. It fades into the riverside brightness, which is still gray, but no longer dark. Under the awning, the back of the stall keeps its cooler air. You add another opened blossom to the enamel cup, then another. The cup begins to look less like a temporary resting place and more like a very small arrangement no one planned. The pale flowers lean against one another with almost no weight. Their silver centers make a dim constellation against the white glaze. You think of how many things in this stall are hidden on purpose. Bind wire under raffia, water picks tucked inside sleeves, the exact slant of a rose stem disappearing under the waterline where it can do its work unseen. They do not need a separate table or any telling. They can sit among the ordinary stock and remain exactly what they are. When you find the next one, you do not even pause. Your hand closes around the stem, and by the time you have lifted it clear of the leaves, the petals are already easing apart. Your hands are warm from work. The pleasant heaviness that was in your shoulders when you arrived is still there, but altered. Earlier, it had the flat weight of yesterday's festival still attached to it. Too many stems, too much color, too much standing. Now it feels more like warmth after carrying something useful. Your fingers smell faintly of green stems and rose water. A cool, damp mark from the pebble tray has dried on your wrist. You set this flower in the cup as well. The stall keeper returns to the back for a crate of paper sleeves, and, seeing the enamel cup with its pale contents, shifts it a few inches farther from the edge of the shelf with one finger. That is all. No smile broadens the moment. No glance asks whether you have understood. The gesture is practical. Keep it from being knocked. Keep it where it can stay. Yet, in that small movement, there is also the sense that the cup has entered the morning's order, like any other object now assigned its place. You go on with the pots for a while after that, setting one small plant after another onto the pebble trays so the roots remain above the water. The pebbles click faintly against the metal when you add a little more to support a narrower base. A bead of water slips between them and catches the light before disappearing into the shallow shine below. The enamel cup remains just to your right, pale blossoms collected in it, and each time you turn your head, you see them without needing to look directly. After a few minutes, Your hand reaches again toward the bucket of mixed stems, almost by itself. There is one bud left, tucked low near a cream rose whose outer petals have browned at the edge. You free it carefully so as not to disturb the others. The rose leaf brushes your knuckle. The bud is cooler than the last at first, and you think perhaps you are mistaken. Then your palm closes around it more fully, shielding it from the draft that passes under the shelf. And there it is again, the minute easing, the petals separating, as if they had only been waiting for warmth measured in skin rather than weather. This one opens a little wider than the others. The silver center is clearer, almost pearly. For a moment, you hold it without moving, and something in you answers with the same kind of release. Not emotion exactly, not even relief, but a lessening of effort you had not noticed you were making. The market has been full of tasks that improve a flower's chances. Cut lower, strip this, mist that, sleeve these for travel. Tie those stems together so they keep their shape. This requires none of that. Your hand is enough. The warmth of your hand opens it. You place the last flower in the cup. The cup holds 5 blossoms now. Silver centers faint in the dimness. A chipped enamel cup at the back of a flower stall, under damp canvas on a gray Paris morning. Nearby, ranunculus and lisianthus continue being themselves. The market roses drink from their buckets. Nothing else alters to mark the occasion. At the front, paper rustles again as a sleeve is opened. The stall keeper lays something down, perhaps a posy, perhaps a single stem prepared for carrying. Cups touch saucers across the aisle in a pair of light clinks. Someone passes the entrance, and the draft shifts the edge of a hanging apron before it falls still again. You rest your fingertips on the shelf beside the cup and stand there for another moment, not claiming the flowers, not solving them. You only make room. That seems to be the right scale for this place and this hour. A little room in a cup. A little room among the ordinary stems. A little room in yourself for being tired without needing to set the tiredness aside. Then you turn back to the work within reach. A pot to center on its pebbles. A leaf to free from where it has bent under another. A bucket to nudge half an inch so the stems sit straighter in their water. The pale blossoms remain beside you in the enamel cup, their silver centers barely brighter than the morning light. And the back of the stall keeps its cool, leaf-scented hush as Paris continues brightening beyond the awnings. Chapter 10. Returning the shears to the drawer and putting every tool back in place. Then, after the pale blossoms have been noticed and set nearby in their enamel cup, you start putting things away. You feel it first in the shape of your hands. All morning they have been reaching outward, for stems, for paper, for buckets to straighten, for raffia to draw through your fingers, for the spray bottle, the cold water jug, the little clear picks. Now your hands begin to gather inward instead. The back of the stall is cooler than the aisle, and the damp in the air has settled into the apron at your middle. When you shift your weight, The stone under your soles gives back the stored chill of rain. Near the front, beyond the line of buckets and the low table, the market has brightened by a shade or two. Not sunshine, only a lighter gray through the awnings, enough to turn the rims of pails and the edges of paper more distinct. Across the aisle, cups touch saucers once, then again, and the smell of coffee with warm milk passes through and thins among the leaves. The stall-keeper comes beside you without any need to announce the next task. They lift the tray of water picks, glance over the finished posies in their brown paper, then set the tray squarely beneath the table where it belongs. One hand rests for a moment on the drawer front, below the folded linen square. Not opening it yet, just marking the place. You understand. The thorn strippers are first. They lie where they were left after the roses. Dull green plastic against the wood. Ordinary-looking tools that have already done their part. You take them to the bucket kept for rinsing, dip them once, and move your thumb along the inside edge where a little bit of green from a torn leaf has dried. The plastic is cool and faintly rough under the pad of your finger. When the last clinging fragment loosens, you shake off the water. Not hard, only enough that no droplets will run into the drawer later, and set the pair side by side on the cloth near the back to dry. You rinse them and set them aside to dry. Next comes the bind wire. The spool has rolled half a turn from where it was nudged nearer your elbow earlier, and the loose end has a habit of slipping away if it is not found at once. You pick it up and feel the small weight of it settle into your palm. The wire is thin enough to bend with almost no effort, but it remembers every curve you have given it. A kink catches the light. You smooth it with your thumbnail and begin winding the loose length back around the spool in patient circles, each loop laid beside the last. Not too tight, or it will spring awkwardly next time. Not too loose, or it will spill itself. Just enough tension that the wire keeps its shape and stays where it is put. You find yourself matching the rhythm of your breath to the turning of your wrist. Loop, lay, turn. Loop, lay, turn. When the end is reached, you tuck it under one of the wound circles and test it lightly. It holds. The spool goes into its place beneath the shelf, beside the packet of spare ties, and behind the stack of flattened paper sleeves. You would not have known that place this morning. Now your hand goes there without searching. The raffia follows. It has softened a little in the damp air, less brittle than it was when first drawn from the spool. A few strands have escaped and curled over the tabletop like pale straw. You gather them, align their ends, and wind them back with a broader motion than the wire required. Raffia gives differently under the fingers. It drags a little against your skin, then slips. One strand catches at the dry place near your knuckle and releases. You tuck the loose tail under itself and place the spool back where the stall keeper keeps it, close enough to the craft paper that the pairing remains obvious even in half attention. The paper sleeves are already mostly in order, but not entirely. A few have slumped apart from the stack after the last stems were slid inside them. You square them by tapping the short ends against the table. Their edges make a crisp, papery knock. One sleeve still carries the faint cool from a water pick that rested inside it. Another smells of rose leaves and damp craft. You nest them together and slide the whole stack under the overhang at the side, where they will stay dry enough to keep their shape. The stall keeper is working in parallel a few feet away, not checking your progress, not hovering. They lift one white enamel bucket, pour off a little clouded water into a larger pail, then top it with fresh. The stream makes a low, hollow note against metal. A tulip leaf clings to the inside rim and is pressed back down with 2 fingers. They move as they have all morning. Exact, economical, never abrupt. You have fallen into the same cadence without noticing when it happened. On the table, near the front edge, the red-handled shears still rest on their folded linen square. You have been aware of them all morning, even when not touching them. The place they occupy has become one of the fixed points of the stall, as steady as the bucket corners, the apron hook, the crate of posies lined with yesterday's newspaper. The paint is chipped at the inner curve of the handles. A bead of moisture has gathered near the hinge from the damp in the air, and a faint green line marks one blade where a stem was cut and wiped, then cut again. Before you take them up, you wipe your own fingertips on the apron. It is not necessary exactly, more a matter of sequence. Dry hand, dry cloth, dry blade. The linen square has a crease running down its middle from repeated folding. You lift the shears from it and feel their familiar weight settle into your palm. Heavier than they look, balanced toward the hinge. When you open and close them once, only to test, the blades meet with a neat, contained click. No strain in the pivot, no grit. They have been cared for properly for years, you think. And because of that, they still move as though they have all the time they need. You take the cloth kept for this purpose, the one already marked by old green smudges and faint rust-colored shadows from rose stems, and draw it carefully along one blade, then the other. Not a hurried swipe. A full pass from hinge to tip, turning the shears to catch each side. A little moisture comes away. Then a second pass, slower over the inner faces where sap likes to sit. The metal grows brighter as it dries, though not polished, just clean, ready to rest. You wipe the hinge once more with the corner of the cloth. A single petal, loosened from somewhere in the morning's work, has found its way onto the linen square. Not a whole rose petal this time, only a narrow, curved piece, tea-pink at one edge, and almost white at the torn center. You brush it aside with the back of a finger. It sticks for a moment to your skin, then falls to the floorboards beneath the table, and stays there among 2 leaf tips and a short piece of clipped stem. The shears go back down onto the folded linen exactly where they began. Handles angled slightly toward the right, blades inward. For a moment, you leave them there. The stall keeper glances over once, sees the shears dry on the cloth, and lowers their eyes again to the bucket they are straightening. That is all. You crouch a little to reach the shallow drawer. The wooden pole is cool and slightly rounded. When you draw it open, it slides with almost no complaint. Only a low, grain-on-grain sound. Inside are the spaces the morning has taught you. Where the shears lie, where the spare labels sit banded together, where a pencil, worn short by sharpening, rests beside a small roll of tape, where nothing is crowded because each object has been given only the room it needs. You lift the shears again and set them into the drawer on the linen square, which folds around them just enough to keep the blades from damp wood. Then you close the drawer. The drawer shuts with a soft wooden slide. You stay there a moment longer with your fingers resting on the drawer front. It is cool from the air under the table. The grain presses faintly into your skin. You realize that what has become restful is not the stopping, but the exactness. Nothing left half-placed. Nothing balanced on an edge to be dealt with later. The mind eases when the hand does not need to remember unfinished positions. Above you, the market continues in its low register. A cart moves somewhere farther down the covered row, its wheels rough over wet stone, and then softened by distance. Someone shakes rain from an umbrella near the entrance. You hear the brief patter, and then the umbrella's ribs drawn tight again. The café sends another thread of warm milk and roasted coffee through the damp air. It reaches the back of the stall faintly now, mixed with leaf water, cut stems, and the mineral smell of stone slowly drying where shoes have not passed. There are still tiny things to settle. You gather the short, clipped ends of wire into your palm and carry them to the bin. You fold the green cloth used for the thorn strippers and lay it over the rim of the rinsing bucket to dry. You turn the spray bottle so its nozzle faces inward and set it behind the taller pails where it will not be knocked. The enamel cup with the pale lucky flowers remains near the back, and when you move a crate an inch to clear the floor, one of those silver-centered blooms opens a fraction more, no larger than a coin, as if warmth still lingers where your hand held it earlier. You do not stop over it long. It is enough to see it there, among the ordinary things. The stall-keeper comes to stand beside the table and gives the surface one final pass with the flat of their palm. Not wiping, just feeling for what may have been left behind. Their hand finds nothing. Then they reach up to straighten the corner of a brown paper stack, tuck one stray raffia fiber back into place, and rest their knuckles briefly against the drawer front you have just closed. It is the nearest thing to praise all morning, and because it is made of touch and placement rather than speech, it fits the hour perfectly. You look over the stall as they did at the start of the day, though now the view has changed. Buckets stand in cleaner lines. Tulips that needed shorter use have their own place. Roses drink from newly cut ends. Sleeved stems with water picks lie ready in their crate. Small posies sit wrapped and shaped, their hidden wire doing its work under raffia and craft. The little pots at the back rest above their pebble trays, roots dry, air cool around them. near the ranunculus and lisianthus, the pale blossoms with silver centers remain in their enamel cup, not set apart by anything except your having noticed them. Now your hand goes to the places things belong without searching. That knowledge settles differently. It is not the bright satisfaction of finishing something difficult, more like setting your shoulders down after carrying a basket farther than you realized. The apron tie at your waist has loosened a little with the hours. You retie it without thinking, then smooth the damp fabric once over your middle. Your hands smell faintly of rose stem, paper, and clean metal. At the front edge of the awning, a line of collected rainwater finally gives way and drops in a brief run into the gutter beyond the stall. The sound is narrow and silver, over almost as soon as it begins. The light from the Seine side reaches under the canvas a little farther now, enough to touch the lip of the nearest bucket and the corner of the folded newspaper in the crate. Nothing needs doing at once. And because of that, the exact places matter even more. The drawer shut, the shears dry, the wire coiled, the raffia tucked back, the thorn strippers rinsed and set aside. Around you, the stall has resumed its shape so completely that the morning's work is visible mostly in what no longer protrudes, no longer leans, no longer risks being forgotten. You stand in that order for another breath, then another, with the stall-keeper beside you and the market carrying on under the green ironwork and damp awnings, the café murmuring across the aisle, and the tools put back where they belong until a hand reaches for them again. Chapter 11. Listening to Café murmur as Paris brightens. Beyond the awnings, you remain where you are for a little while after the last drawer has closed. Not because there is another task to begin at once, and not because you have decided to stop, but because the stall has reached that in-between state that belongs to morning after useful work. The buckets stand in their lines. The posies rest in their brown paper with the raffia tucked flat, and the hidden wire doing its work out of sight. The smallest pots sit farther back on their pebble trays, roots lifted above the thin shine of water. Near them, among the ranunculus and lisianthus, the pale, lucky flowers are only flowers again, unless you look directly at their silver centers. Under the awning, the air has changed from the first wet gray of dawn into something lighter, though still cool enough that your hands remember the chill of metal and stem. You are not waiting for the next instruction in it now. You stay where you are. Across the aisle, the café is awake in the way it has been awake all morning. Never suddenly, only by degrees. A cup meets a saucer with a brief porcelain note. Then another. The smell of coffee reaches you in a warm brown thread. And with it, milk heated just enough to sweeten the air without turning it heavy. You do not see the counter or the hands setting cups down. You do not need to. By now, the place across from you is more sound and scent than shape. Spoon against ceramic, a low exchange of words too blurred to separate. steam carrying itself under the canvas and into the flower smell until the two belong to the same hour. Earlier, those sounds might have marked a world beside yours. Now they seem to pass through the same working air. The light from the Seine side has altered while you were occupied. Earlier, it had the color of wet slate, nearly charcoal under the awning edges. But now it comes in pearl gray, and where it touches the stone aisle, it picks out the uneven gloss left by rain. Beyond the shelter, the gutter still carries a narrow run of water. Every so often, a drop falls from the awning seam and joins it with a pin-sized tap. You find yourself listening to those little arrivals, the way you listened earlier to stems entering water. Not for meaning, only for the shape of the sound and the pause after it. The listening is easier now. Nothing in you is braced against interruption. The stall-keeper stands not far from you, one hand resting near the table's edge, apron marked darker, where dampness has risen from the stone and found the cloth. There is nothing new in that posture now. It has the same practical stillness as the shears laid back on their folded linen square before being slid into the drawer. The same exactness as the thorn strippers set side by side to dry. The same unannounced completeness as a bucket turned so its handle does not jut into the aisle. You have spent enough of the morning beside this person to recognize the absence of hurry as a kind of fluency. It no longer feels like something you are watching from nearby. Your own stillness has begun to take its cue from it. A chair moves somewhere across the aisle, one leg scraping the stone before the others follow. It is a short sound, wooden and ordinary. Then it stops. A murmur resumes, low and even, and the market returns to its earlier scale. Footsteps passing under the arches, paper adjusted at another stall, the faint clink of something metal set down carefully. Nothing presses toward you. The day has begun, but from under the awning, it no longer begins at a distance. The stall no longer feels provisional. You shift your weight from one foot to the other and feel the floor through the soles of your shoes, the slight chill that remains in the stone despite the brightening hour. Your apron tie sits flat at your waist now, no longer strange there. One cuff is still faintly cool, where mist from the spray bottle settled earlier. These are small bodily facts, and because the work has thinned out, you notice them more clearly. Your fingers carry traces of the morning's textures. The dry drag of craft paper against the pads of the thumb and forefinger. The slick firmness of tulip stems. The brief resistance of rosewood before the shears closed through it. The almost weightless loop of bind wire before it was twisted flat and hidden. Even after washing or wiping, those sensations remain in memory, like the shape left in your palm after carrying a handle. They do not feel borrowed anymore. A customer-shaped shadow passes the aisle again, slower this time. It lengthens over the wet stone, pauses near the front edge of the stall, then resolves into a man under a dark umbrella, folded now and dripping at his side. His glance moves over the posies, then to you. For a second, it seems he may speak. You are aware of the stall-keeper beside you without looking. But the man only gives the smallest nod, as if acknowledging that the stall is attended, and goes on toward the café. The moment closes without needing anything from either of you. The bouquets are visible. The buckets are straight. That is enough for now. You look outward a little more than before. Under the green ironwork, the market has its own morning geometry. Posts darkened by damp, awning hems beaded with water, tabletops leveled after yesterday's abundance, buckets aligned so that each row can be read at a glance. The order is not decorative. You can feel that plainly now, not as an arrangement imposed on things, but as the shapework leaves behind when it has been done well. Roses in the deeper water, tulips where their moving heads have room, sleeved stems tucked together in a crate so the paper does not crumple before someone carries them away, small pots raised on pebbles so the air around them cools without soaking the roots. You've helped put the stall in order. The café sends over another drift of warm milk, stronger for a moment, as though a door has opened and shut. With it comes a brighter clatter. 2 cups, perhaps 3, then the thin ring of a spoon tapped once against a rim. The sound travels under the canvas and softens before it reaches you. You think how different this morning might have felt if anyone had tried to fill it with talk. Instead, it has been built out of glances, set down objects, tools returned to their places, a spool nudged nearer your elbow, an apron left on a hook, a stem taken gently from your hand and placed in another bucket. You've worked together mostly without speaking. Now, standing in the quiet after, you can hear that companionship continuing even when no one moves. When you turn back toward the stall, the flowers look ready for sale. The roses stand cleaner for having been stripped and recut. Their lower stems are bare and pale where the thorn strippers passed, and the water around them is clear enough to show the angled cuts below the surface. The tulips, sorted by what their necks can still carry, make sense in their separate places. The shorter ones no longer seem like losses. They have simply changed categories. A few posies lean together in the shallow crate, paper ends crisp, raffia knots almost hidden in the folds. One sleeve shifts a fraction as the damp air loosens the paper, then settles. You do not review these things to make sure they were done. You see them the way the stall-keeper must see them, as the morning's order holding on its own. Near the back, where the light is greener and cooler, one of the lucky flowers has opened a little more. Not much. Only enough that the silver in its center catches the pearl light and returns it in a softer tone. The stall-keeper's gaze passes there once and then away. No comment. No second look. You have learned from that as much as from the handling of tulips and roses. Some things in a place are ordinary to the people who spend enough mornings there. Or, if not ordinary, then familiar enough that they do not need to be lifted out and examined. The pale bloom remains in its enamel cup, and that is all. Its being left alone feels, suddenly, like another form of belonging. A pair of footsteps approaches from the riverside, measured and unhurried. They pass under the awning edge, hesitate at another stall, then continue. The sound changes with each surface. Hollow on the boards laid over a threshold, flatter on stone, softened where yesterday's moisture still darkens the joints. You listen because there is time to listen. Earlier, each sound arrived alongside a task. Now the sounds have room around them, and you have room inside them too. The stall-keeper reaches for nothing, only adjusts the fall of a paper sleeve where it is tilted against the crate. The motion is brief and exact. Then the hand returns to rest. You notice, without needing to think much about it, that this is the first part of the morning in which neither of you is preparing for the next step. The next step, if it comes, will come from outside. A customer stopping, a request for a small bunch, a stem chosen for travel. Until then, the market can simply be looked at, and you can stand in that pause without feeling unused. You let your eyes travel toward the brighter edge again, where the awning lifts enough to show a strip of sky reflected in the wet pavement. It is not blue yet. It may never become blue today. But the gray has thinned, and the ironwork no longer cuts such dark lines overhead. Somewhere beyond the stalls, traffic on the bridge passes in a softened rush, too far away to separate into engines or wheels. Closer at hand, a cart rolls over stone with that same rounded wooden rattle you heard earlier. Less lonely now that the morning is fully underway, it fades under the arches and leaves behind the smaller market sounds, which no longer seem separate from the stall, but gathered around it. You breathe in and catch leaf green water, damp paper, coffee, milk, and the faint, clean metal note that rises from buckets when the air is cool. None of it is strong. It comes in layers. Underneath is the smell of rain caught in canvas and released slowly as the hour brightens. If you move one step farther back, the cooler scent of pebbles and nursery pots returns. One step forward, and the coffee becomes clearer. The stall is narrow enough that these changes happen over the length of an arm. You know that distance now with your body, as if the space had been measured into you. A woman stops at the far end of the aisle and speaks to someone you cannot see. Her voice is low, then lower, then gone. Paper answers with a crackle. A child's shoe squeaks once on wet stone and is led away. From the cafe comes the sound of a chair being set back under a table, gentler than when it was drawn out. The market does not swell into busyness. It accumulates these little proofs of wakefulness and leaves space between them. In that space, you are no longer merely listening in. You notice your own tiredness differently now. It is still there, but the edges have changed. Earlier, it sat in your shoulders and behind your eyes, like weather left over from the festival. Now it feels more like warmth after work, a used heaviness rather than a strained one. Standing still helps you detect that difference. So does the fact that nothing remains undone in front of you. Even the pale, impoids blossoms have their place among the ordinary stems. The stallkeeper glances toward you once, not to direct, only to include. It is the same kind of glance that first made room for you beside the buckets at the beginning of the morning. But it has changed in one small way. Then you were being fitted into the rhythm. Now you are already inside it. Chapter 12. Standing in the quiet market, while the morning settles around you. So you stay under the awning and listen as Paris brightens beyond it, slowly. Cup against saucer. A footstep under the arch. Rainwater finding the gutter. Paper settling around flowers meant for someone else's table. The pearl light from the riverside moves a little farther across the stone, and the stall remains as you left it. Arranged, watered, wrapped, and ready. Nothing new is set before you now. That is part of the ease of it. The morning has passed out of sorting and recutting and tying, and into the steadier condition that follows useful work. The bouquets stand in their brown sleeves, with the raffia flattened where your fingers pressed it. The stems inside are kept in shape by the hidden loops of wire you no longer need to think about. A few travel stems rest aside, with their clear water picks in place. Each little tube adding a cool weight at the end of the paper. The smallest pots sit farther back on their pebble trays. Leaves lifted from the damp air. Roots safely above the shine of water. You do not need to check them again at once. It is enough to know where they are. The stallkeeper is near the front, not doing much that can be named from where you stand. A hand shifts a sleeve by half an inch. An apron is tugged flatter at the waist. Then stillness again. You and the stallkeeper share the quiet. You have learned the shape of the stall by moving through it. Front buckets where the light reaches first. The table with its drawer below. The folded linen square where the red-handled shears rested before being wiped dry and put away. The cooler back where the pebble trays gather what is smallest and easiest to overlook. Your own hands have changed temperature since dawn. Earlier, they were chilled by bucket water and wet stems, by cold plastic and enamel rims. Now they are warmer, not from any heat in the air, but from use. If you lay your fingertips against the craft paper of a finished posy, you can feel its slight dampness where the market air has touched it. And beneath that, the firmer roundness of stems gathered together. It is a satisfying thing, that hidden structure. Not decorative, simply correct. Across the aisle, coffee is poured again. You do not see it happen. You know it by the scent arriving a moment before the cup sounds do. Dark roast, then milk warmed enough to sweeten the air. A spoon touches ceramic twice. Someone clears a throat. A chair leg drags once over the floor and then stops. None of it comes close enough to disturb the row under the awning. It only marks the hour more clearly than a clock would. The rain has thinned to something finer than drops. At the edge of the canvas, water still gathers, but more slowly now. Every so often, one bead lets go and falls into the gutter with a sound so slight you notice it only because everything nearby has become so orderly. You find yourself listening for these tiny intervals between one market noise and the next. Paper giving a crisp sigh as it settles around a bouquet. A bucket handle touching enamel. The faint click of someone setting down a bottle farther along the covered row. When you look toward the back again, the lucky flowers are where you left them, among the ranunculus and lisianthus, not arranged apart, not displayed as anything rare. In this light, they could almost be missed. Their petals are pale enough to borrow color from the morning, and their silver centers show only when the gray brightens for a second and catches there. One still sits in the little enamel cup, its stem short, its bloom open the width of a coin. Another leans among ordinary leaves, as if it has always belonged there. Tired hands found them. Warm palms opened them. Now they are part of the stall like the rest. The air at the back remains cooler than the front, and when you step there, the stone under your shoes feels a shade more damp. The pebble trays keep their shallow water in place beneath the pots. A bead slides between two pebbles and stops where the light can reach it. The leaves above cast small shadows over the tray, and the roots stay dry, exactly as they should. You glance over them the way you glanced over the tulips earlier, not searching for flaws, only confirming that each thing is in the right condition for the hour it has entered. The tulips with softened necks taught that without saying so. The roses, too, after the thorn strippers and the long slant cuts and the clean return to water. Nothing here has been forced into looking newer than it is. The work has only given each stem its best chance. Near the front, a customer pauses at last. You know this not from words, but from the changed shape of the light in the aisle, and the brief hush that comes when someone stops walking. The stallkeeper moves then, one step, maybe two. Paper touches paper. A bouquet is lifted. The exchange remains low enough that you hear only tone, not language. A few coins, or perhaps a card, laid on the table. Then another rustle. The departing rhythm of someone carrying flowers away under the awning. It is over, almost before you have turned your head. The stall keeps its shape after that. One bouquet fewer. A little more room in the crate. The same rows of buckets. The same sleeves. The same pale morning. Selling has begun, if that is what this counts as, and the stall keeps going. The flowers go on standing. The paper stacks remain square. The tools stay dried and put back. Morning has found the point where it can continue by itself. Your shoulders have lowered without your noticing. Not dramatically. Just enough that the apron strap sits differently at the back of your neck. If you stand still for a moment, you feel the morning's work in your hands and shoulders. Fingers that have twisted wire and tied raffia. Wrists that have lifted buckets an inch to straighten them. The slight pull across your upper back from leaning over the table to sleeve stems one by one. none of it asks for remedy. It is only the trace left by doing. The stall-keeper returns to the near side of the table and rests a hand there briefly. Not a signal, not a request, just a pause with the palm flat against the wood, as if checking that the surface is dry. Then the hand lifts away. You catch the scent of cut stems again, where the boards are dampened in spots, greener now than floral, almost like snapped bean vines. Under it lies the paper smell that has followed the whole morning. Brown craft, newspaper in the crate, the faint starch of sleeves kept in stacks. From outside the market, farther off than the café, a bell reaches you in a blurred way, thinned by distance and the weather. It does not ring sharply under the awning. It arrives softened by stone and river air, then passes. Afterward, the ordinary sounds seem closer for a little while. A saucer set down, a broom somewhere along the row. Water shifted in a bucket as someone farther away recuts stems of their own. You stay where you are, between the brighter front and the cooler back, in the middle place you have occupied for most of the morning. From here, you can see enough of everything. The wrapped posies, the pails, the shelf with spare paper, the pebble trays, the aisle beyond. The green painted iron above is darkened by damp, and the canvas still carries the weather in its seams. The light from the Seine side has turned from flat gray to a softer pearl, and that change is visible on every metal rim and wet patch of stone. A final mist settles somewhere nearby. You do not at first know whether it comes from the spray bottle in another stall, a passing drift of rain from the awning edge, or the air itself loosening what it has been carrying. It touches your hand so lightly that for a second you think you imagined it. Then another cool speck lands on the paper sleeve nearest you and darkens it by a shade before disappearing into the brown. The flowers darken slightly where the mist lands. A rose petal shows a deeper color at its edge. The lisianthus seem a little less papery. The tulips, those that remain upright in their buckets, keep their own counsel, their petals closed enough to preserve the shape of morning. Even the lucky blossoms do nothing more than continue being open. You think how little has been required for the market to come back into itself. Buckets nudged into line, aprons shaken out, tulips tested at the neck, roses stripped and recut, picks filled, sleeves opened, wire looped, raffia tied, tools dried and returned to the drawer, pebble trays topped with water just below the pots. It is not a grand list when you look at it plainly. Yet each step has altered the whole row by degrees, until everything stands in order again. Another customer may come, or not, for a few minutes. The cafe will keep sending over coffee and warm milk. Cups will continue to meet saucers in that small, bright way. Beyond the awning, the city will keep brightening. Under the shelter, the bouquets remain upright in their sleeves. The little clear picks stay cool around their stems. The pebble trays keep their shallow shine, The pale flowers with silver centers sit among the ordinary stock without any need to be singled out again. You rest your fingertips once more on the nearest wrapped posy, feeling the paper's crease, the gathered stems beneath, the snug place where raffia crosses hidden wire. When you lift your hand, the sleeve keeps the cool, darkened mark of the mist for a moment longer. And beyond it, one small silver center catches the pearl light and holds it